started, can I call Eben, Kelvin, Denise, Valerio, and Nate to the front, please. I'll repeat that. Please, Kelvin, Eben, the seats that are open, not the ones that are closed. Here.
And the order is Eben first, Nate second, Valerio third, Denise, and then Kelvin.
Denise, if you can sit next to Kelvin, that would be. Valeria, if you can sit next to Denise. And Pastor Dalton, if you are available. Oh, yes.
Good afternoon to everybody. We welcome you into the sanctuary of Mount Moriah Baptist Church for this candidate forum series. My name is Lucius Dalton, and for the last 24 years I have been blessed to serve as senior pastor of this church. This church has been in this community since 1958, and we had been in Ward 6, but now we're super delighted to be in Ward 7. I look forward to the opportunity to meet you, and we ask that you please ask any of our disciples all our disciples, raise your hand. They are throughout, also in the sanctuary, vestibule, and here, if you need anything, to let us know. So we're going to open it up in prayer, and we thank God for our candidates who are here. We thank God for our sponsors who are here. Let me thank Brother Parker in the sound booth, our AV person. Special thanks to Deanna Lewis, who was the person who was our liaison to help this to happen. And again, thank all of you for being here today. Let us pray. Father, we praise you and we thank you for this opportunity to witness and to share and to listen. We ask and pray that you would open our hearts and our minds as we do so. And we ask and pray that this forum will be one that is pleasing to you. We ask and pray that you be in our midst, and we ask and pray that you just lead us and guide us and direct us in the way that you would have for us to go. Bless those who will conduct this forum. Bless the candidates. Give them clarity of mind and allow them to speak what you have placed upon their minds. In the name of the Christ, we pray and give thanks. Amen. Brother Ambrose Lane, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Pastor Dalton and the Mount Moriah Baptist Church family for their gracious hospitality in opening their doors to allow us to have an important community candidate forum. I also want to thank, as Pastor Dalton just did, Deanna Lewis and Dante Parker, big shout out to Dante. We are not only streaming this through the church website, but we are recording this, and once this is completed, this will go out over Ward 7 so that anyone who could not be here will be able to see the candidates in action. I also want to thank Million Man Vote for their support and guidance in creating this forum, our co-moderators, representing the NAACP as Vice President, Carmel Henry, and of course, Akoshua Ali, who couldn't be here because she's having a baby. So we want to thank them for their support and their collaboration. We also want to thank the Ward 7 Education Council and Dr. Marla Dean for their collaboration. She is here and she's not having a baby. And also the 26 additional supporting community organizations, some of whom are present, and then lastly, the residents and communities themselves concerned about the future of our ward and of Washington, D.C. Now the rules. Let me first share with you what Million Man Vote is. I am lead organizer for Million Man Vote. It is an organization with a general focus and purpose of registering black men to vote in elections at the local, state, and national level. I'll take that. To advocate and educate black men on the issues of importance to black men and the black community, and to develop an actionable black man's agenda around those issues. We are about 3/4 complete of developing that black man's agenda. To educate black men about the value, importance, and impact of their vote and their participation in the electoral process. To educate black men in all jurisdictions about voter eligibility, registration, and the voting process. To educate black men about candidates and their political and issues positions. To lobby regarding proposed national legislation when appropriate and as determined by Million Man Vote leadership, and to follow IRS guidelines regarding lobbying. To provide black men voter logistical information in jurisdictions that will encourage maximum participation at the polls and in the voting process. Now the rules for this candidate forum. Each participating candidate's name will be announced at the beginning of their panel. Each candidate will receive 2 minutes for an opening statement. Each candidate will take turns answering moderator questions first, with candidates to their right answering next. Candidates in this panel will have up to 60 seconds to answer the moderator's question. We have a timer right here. Please raise your hand and give a hand to Rajah Burks. Got to give him a hand. But now I'm going to tell you why you got to give him a hand. He was just accepted into Cornell's law school. He is our timekeeper. When there are 15 seconds left in the answer, he will raise his hand. When the time is up, he will say, "Time is up." And he'll say it pretty loud. After all candidates have answered the moderator's question, each candidate will have an opportunity to rebut the answer another candidate gave, only on the question that was asked by the moderator. So there will be no rebuttal of questions, 2 questions before, 3 questions before. That's not going to work. You can only rebut on the question that was asked by the moderator. The rebuttal time cannot exceed 30 seconds. You will raise your hand if you want to rebut. Only 1 rebuttal is permitted. Rebuttals cannot be in the form of a question. Candidates may not rebut more than 1 other candidate's answer. So if you raise your hand to do a rebuttal, you cannot rebut 2 candidates. You can only rebut 1 candidate's answer. You only have 30 seconds to do it. It cannot be in the form of a question. After rounds of questions from the moderators, rounds of audience questions will be taken by the lead moderator, that's me. Round 1 will be questions from specific representatives here in the audience. In round 2, time permitting, will be from general audience members. Candidates' answers to audience questions shall not exceed 45 seconds. Candidates will have no rebuttal during audience question rounds. After audience questions, there will be a bullet or targeted round from the moderators that will follow the audience questions. The bullet target round candidate answers will require a yes or no answer or be no longer than 15 seconds depending upon the question. Candidates will then receive a 1 minute for their closing remarks. Those are the rules that we will enforce very strictly in this moderators forum. Thank you so much, and we are now going to get started.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carmel Henry. I'm the Vice President for the NAACP DC branch. I'll repeat the question twice. And Mr. Allen, we'll start with you. What policy changes or investments are necessary to encourage literacy among African American males in Ward 7? What policy changes or investments are necessary to encourage increased literacy among African American males in Ward 7?
Good evening, Ward 7. My name is Eben A. Allen. I'm running for Ward 7 DC Council. One of my platforms and initiatives I've taken is I started Black Kings That Read Literacy at C.W. Harris Elementary, where we talk to first graders about literacy. And so it's not just about having a title or becoming a councilman, but also doing the groundwork and educating the masses of our young men. But also, let's talk about there's only 1% of African-American male teachers in our country. And so we need to provide funding through this budget when it comes to education, funding to recruit more African-American males to be in the classroom. And so it's dismal that we only have 1% of African-American males in our classroom, and we have to encourage that our young boys should be able to emulate those young men that's in the classroom who has professions. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for the question.
I'm going to take a personal point of privilege and apologize to you, Eben. You really should have had 2 minutes for your opening statement first. You may go if you want to. Okay, then we will go to opening statements. We'll start with...
Thank you, Ambrose. I'm Eben A. Allen. I'm running for Ward 7 DC Council. I'm a second-generation Ward 7 native. My mom, she grew up on a small street called Hannah Place. My dad, he grew up in Lincoln Heights. My brother also grew up in Bennett Terrace. And so I actually grew up on Hannah Place as well as a young boy. And so all these years, I never knew that I'll be running for Ward 7 DC Council. And so some of the things that I've accomplished, first of all, I want to acknowledge my wife and my 3 sons who are at home. They're 6, 4, and 2 years old. And so I'm happily married, and we have a happy home where we reside in Marshall Heights. Some of the things that I've accomplished as an former ANC commissioner is that I work with Mayor Bowser and Councilman Vincent Gray to bring the $11.2 million recreational center, which we now know as the Woody Ward Recreational Center, that's in the Bennett Park community. I also was able to bring 15 new townhomes to Ward 7. Also, when we talk about numbers and we talk about black male education, black male education, as a Morehouse man, I brought Morehouse Day, where we talked to 450 young men about conflict resolution, applying for scholarships and grants, going to Morehouse and becoming a Morehouse man, and entrepreneurship. And all of those grants and all of those programs are very, very important to share with the young men. 2 of the schools that we worked with was Kelly Miller Middle School and Ron Brown High School. And so it was a great service to share those particular topics with the young men in Ward 7. And so also I want to bring equity when it comes to education, public safety. All our residents they need public safety. A lot of our residents are living in trauma, and so we have to hold those individuals accountable for the crimes that they're committing. And so when we talk about the Fletcher Johnson Project, we need transparency when you talk about DMPED and what they're bringing to the community, because the community deserves the most. Thank you.
Nate Bennett Fleming, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement. Nate Bennett Fleming, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
So, everyone, raise your hand if you're a Ward 7 resident. All right, and raise your hand if you're an undecided voter in this race and a Ward 7 resident. All right, so I'm talking to the few undecided voters in this room. I think it's important to understand that a lot of these forms that are being presented, a lot of they're presented as their objective forms, but the organizers are supporting other candidates in this race, so you need to really understand that. My name is Nate Fleming. I'm running because I have the live educational and professional experience to deliver results for you. What do I mean by lived experience? I grew up here in Ward 7, single mother household in the 80s, but my mom really focused on education. And education took me from Southeast to Morehouse College to University of California, Berkeley to study law. I received a full scholarship to Harvard University to study government, and I'm currently receiving my doctorate this year from the University of Pennsylvania. So I didn't go about collecting degrees. I went about collecting knowledge so that I could come back to my community and serve. I believe that when you get opportunities, you have a responsibility to create opportunities for other people, and that's exactly what I've been doing. So I was elected to be your U.S. representative to Congress. I served for 2 years, and in those 2 years, we were able to lay the foundation to get a D.C. statehood bill passed in Congress for the first time in history. But I've also worked at the council for 5 years. And working at the council, I've delivered for you. I created the Ward 7 Dream Grants program, the Ward 7 Restaurant Incentive Act. I brought Bard Early College High School over to Southeast, the only application high school in Southeast. And I've also changed the funding formula for how schools are funded so that more funds go to East of the River schools. So that's the type of work that I want to build upon when it comes to legislation, oversight, the budget, zoning, comprehensive plan, constituent services, negotiating with developers. Every candidate that's running in this race, there'll be novices, there'll be rookies at doing that job. I've done that job and delivered results for 5 years. Thank you so much.
Everybody knows VJ Ambrose. It's cool. I told myself a while ago I wouldn't go behind Nate, and here I am behind Nate. But I'll do my best. Nate is a very talented staffer, or was staffer at the Wilson Building. But when we look at leadership and we try to figure out what we need to decide on, it's competence, it's capacity, it's commitment. And my pledge to you is what I've been doing for the last 20 years, engaging you, being responsive, and being accountable. I don't talk about what a council member should do or shouldn't do. I tell you what I'm going to do. And the reason why I can tell you what I'm going to do is because I've already done it. And the decision you make about your future, about your vote, is based on past performance. While everybody up here is great, all candidates are successful professionally, they have great education, we have to make the decision on which one of them have been delivering for you for the last 2 decades, impacting your community, impacting your issues, and that person is me. I've done, how much time we have? I'm trying to pace this out. Okay, thank you. So with my last 50 seconds, I'll talk about my education. I went to Savannah State University. I went to Nyack College. I received certifications in leadership and nonprofit management from the University of District of Columbia. I've served as an ANC commissioner for almost 6 years. I did a half term. When Dolly Davis stepped down, I stepped in and I stepped up. Just like that, in Hillcrest, when I became the president of ACCA. The former president, Karen Williams, stepped down. I stepped in, I stepped up. And here we are, Ward 7. Our council member has retired, so I'm gonna do what I've always done. I'm gonna step in, and I'm gonna step up, and I'm gonna deliver you the results because we're building bridges and connecting people to what you want and need.
Good afternoon, neighbors. I'm Denise Reed, number 2 on the ballot, and I dare anyone, any of the opponents, to challenge my public service record. I started with David Clark as his Director of Communications in 1993. I went on from there to work for the then Chief Financial Officer, Anthony Williams, and all of these have been in a communications capacity. I went from there to work for our Ward 7 council member, Kevin Chavis, as his Chief of Staff. Then I went on to work for Linda Kropp in a communications capacity, and also Chairman Vincent Gray before he, after he was Ward 7 chairman the first time. I spent about a little over 13 years working for the district. Oh, I also was the public information officer for the fire department and the DC School Board. And so in 2007, I went over to the federal government, to an agency that is federal but serves only the district, and that is CSOSA, the Court Services and Offender Supervision Agency, where I spent 16 years. I retired from there on January 11th, and I filed my candidacy the next day on January 12th, because I looked at the pool of candidates and I said, there's no way that I can't do that job and hit the ground running. I don't require on-the-job training. I'm ready to go from day one. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm ready. I know the Wilson Building. I know what Ward 7 needs, and I know how to bring it all together for all of us. Thank you.
Greetings, my name is Kelvin Brown. I am also a candidate for the Ward 7 council member seat. Thank you to the organizers, and thank you most importantly to all of our residents who have shown up today and taken time out of your Saturday. My story is no different than maybe many of your stories. I'm a product of a single family mother, raised in a household with 7 other brothers, and as I funnily say is that we 7 brothers in the 2-bedroom house with 1 bathroom. At a very, very early age, I understood what conflict management was about and how to resolve issues in the household. So as you can tell, we're gonna have a lot of conflict, right? So I'll have early training. And so what we lacked from a financial standpoint, the community made up for and poured into not only myself, my brothers, and as well as my mother, because we knew and understood community value and how important that was to me becoming a grown man and having those vast experiences. And so I was able to graduate, receive a presidential scholarship to attend Alabama State University, become the first person in my family to graduate not only college, but also to go on to receive a Master's of Business Administration degree. And like my friend Nate here, I'm also enrolled at the University of California, Berkeley. I'm in that business executive program. And so from this, I joined the military. I served nearly 10 years and was deployed on 3 tours of duty, fighting abroad to secure the democracy and the freedoms that we enjoy today. But when I got back safely, I quickly realized that the actual front lines were not overseas in a foreign country, but they were in our communities. And so I enlisted again, but this time to become a school teacher. I taught algebra and geometry for nearly 5 years, and 2 of those years I was considered a highly certified teacher. And from there, I held many positions with Fortune 50 countries around the country in senior leadership roles. And now I have the honor or privilege of serving for nearly 12 years at Fannie Mae in control, managing our housing affordability and racial equity division for Fannie Mae. And I welcome the opportunity to speak to you today, share my platform, my background, and my thought and vision about what a future Ward 7 can be. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'll repeat the question that was initially asked. What policy changes or investments are necessary to encourage increased literacy among African American males in Ward 7? Again, a second time. What policy changes or investments are necessary to encourage increased literacy among African American males in Ward 7? And we will start with Mr. Fleming.
And can you repeat the question, please? Can you repeat the question, please?
So, again, as I said at the beginning, so when we ask the question will be given twice to each candidate. So the question will be given twice.
Okay, very well. So as it relates to literacy, in Ward 8, only 18% of our kids are performing on grade level as it relates to reading. The number is 8% as it relates for math. So I believe for our boys, the number might be lower. As it relates to literacy, I grew up in Ward 7. I grew up on Minnesota Avenue. I grew up near the Benning Road Library. It's now called Dorothy Height. I read almost every book in that library that I was remotely interested in. One time I took a book home about sex when I was 8 years old, and the librarian called my mom and said, "No, son, checked out a book about sex." Well, guess what we got to do? We got to make sure that our young people are connected to libraries. We need to focus on high-impact tutoring. High-impact tutoring engages our young people outside of the classroom to make sure that they're making progress in terms of learning how to read. We also have a lot of literacy nonprofits in our city. We need to make sure that we increase the capacity of those literacy nonprofits. But finally, at the end of the day, we need to support our parents. Our parents are the first teacher. I have 2 one-year-old infant twins at home, and books come into our house every month from the DC Public Library. So we need to make sure we support our parents and making sure that they have the tools to equip their young people with the phonics and the reading knowledge that they need at childhood. Thank you.
As a father of a 9-year-old boy, I could talk about what I've done as a parent in making the demand and an expectation where I assume competence. In my household, you will be literate, you will read. But there are some other things that are necessary. He is privileged to have 2 educated parents with master's degrees, and he also understands that the expectation is high. But when we look at the issue in Ward 7, we have 2 Ward 7 residents that's doing great work around literacy. We need to redirect resources and opportunity to those platforms that already exist, Community College Preparatory Academy, and I think the Literacy Fund, which is Jimmy Williams and CC Prep, was founded by the late Connie Spinner. And I've worked with Connie Spinner. I've worked at the Community College Preparatory Academy. If we're going to take literacy seriously, and if we're going to do more for our black male children, then we have to demand early in all environments that they do it and that we invest in it. We all know that at the 4th grade, that's a critical stage in our young people's development, especially for our black males. If they don't have the requisite ability and skills at that time, it's downhill from there, and we're going to see some other changes that we don't like.
I believe with young males, it mainly needs to be an incentive. It needs to be something competitive. There needs to be competition involved, just like they compete in sports. I think literacy and reading needs to be a part of it. And it needs to be cool to be literate. It needs to be cool to read a book. I can remember when I was younger, I have a cousin who still is a voracious reader. And many times people were critical of her. She happened to be a girl. But they would walk in and say, "What are you reading for? It's not school time." I mean, and she can read and digest everything, and it's no reason why male students can't do the same thing. So again, I think it needs to have incentives connected to it. I think it needs to be competitive, and I think they need to be rewarded, and eventually it'll become a part of their life, a part of their lifestyle. The parents would get involved also because they'd realize that this is a key to their sons' futures. And so mainly I think incentives need to be administrated in order to increase male reading and literacy. Thank you.
As a former educator, and been in the classroom for many years, I saw firsthand what the importance of reading and how important literacy was, not only to our young males, but also to our young females as well. And so I truly begin that literacy starts at home. And it's incumbent upon us, and as council member, one of the things that I would do would be strengthen the resources that are available not only to the student while they're in school, but also provide resources and create an environment in the school system that is welcoming to their parents as well, so that they can reinforce exactly everything that the student is learning in the classroom. And so even if you look at my campaign, our campaign is built from little Carter, who is 9, 10 years old right now, 9.5, 10 years old right now, who is so curious about the world and so curious about literacy and reading and understand how the world works. And it's based on experiences, right? Experiences not only in the classroom, but experiences in the world. And I know that firsthand. So while the council member has a role to play in literacy across the ward, we must equip our parents with the necessary tools, ability, and skills to support the teachers inside and outside the classroom. So I would be directed funding to ensure that there's programs for out of school time, pre-K reading, double down on those, but also support the teachers and their families.
Thank you all. We will now have 30 seconds for rebuttal. So each candidate will have 30 seconds for rebuttal, if you have a.
Since there are no rebuttals, we'll go to the next question. The secure, and we will begin with Nate Bennett Fleming as we began with Evan Allen in the first round. No, we did not.
I asked you before you got here.
The Secure DC Act crime legislation may have resulted in unintended consequences. For example, the declaration of 5-day drug-free zones, even in Ward 7, has resulted in some unhoused and substance use disorder residents moving to other streets in the neighborhood and, in some cases, into libraries where non-fatal overdoses and Narcan reviving have occurred in the proximity of children. What specifically would you change, alter, or delete from the Secure DC Act legislation, and what alternatives would you provide? I'll repeat the question. The Secure DC Act crime legislation may have resulted in unintended consequences. For example, the declaration of 5-day drug-free zones, even in Ward 7, has resulted in some unhoused and substance use disorder residents moving to other streets in the neighborhood and in some cases into libraries where non-fatal overdoses and Narcan reviving have occurred in the proximity of children. What specifically would you change, alter, or delete from the Secure DC Act legislation, and what alternatives would you provide?
Certainly. I didn't mention that I teach law currently. I'm a law professor. I teach at DePaul University College of Law. I formerly taught at the University of the District of Columbia. The course that I teach is constitutional law, and that's the perspective that I would focus on. The drug-free zones, it's not always about what you do, it's about how you do it. And when you're a government, you need to make sure that everything you do, you have to do it constitutionally, because if you don't, it'll be challenged in court, it'll be overturned. I think the drug-free zones, we have some issues as it relates to constitutional issues around the First Amendment, as it relates to the ability to freely assemble. So things that I would change as it relates to the bill, I would make sure that we're focusing on the coordination and the delivery of mental health services to coincide with our police efforts. As you mentioned, there's plenty of people that need substance abuse training, help. There's plenty of people that need mental health counseling, and we need to make sure that we're pairing that with our efforts to make our streets more safe. I would say in general, as it relates to public safety, we need to focus on a multi-tiered approach, a comprehensive approach. We need to take both small short-term solutions, but also long-term solutions. So as it relates to policing, we need to have community-based policing. We need to have relationship-based policing. We need to get the police officers, they need to be visible, but not just sitting in their cars. We need to complement those cars with foot patrols. We need to complement those cars with motorized vehicles. We need to motorized scooters and bike lanes to make sure that police are out there developing relationships. Because right now, only 47% of homicides in this city result in an arrest. An even smaller number results in a conviction. Why is that? Because our officers don't have the relationships that they need to solve crimes. But in addition, we need to make sure that we do several things, and I'll close up and talk more about how we can address the root causes of our crime in further questions. Thank you.
Let's first acknowledge the complication in this question. I think Secure DC was the right step in the right direction that the government and the council, or the executive and the council could come together with to respond to public outcry. So let's not demonize them for trying to make a difference. When we first went to clean up Needle Park, that was Councilmember Gray, one of his very first initiatives on Division in Nellie Helen Burroughs Avenue. They were successful at cleaning up that park, but they created another problem on Good Hope Road. Right? So we have to understand that the problems that we're attacking in one community often goes to another community, and we never get to the root cause, okay? Why are people coping with substance abuse in the first place? Are we doing the things that we need to do, right? My dad suffered from substance abuse, but he had a good job, and he had an ability to cope and hide it. Some of our folks don't. They end up on the street because family turned on them or whatever their issues are. Are we really making this about Secure DC, or are we making this about health and human services and the right investments into our communities to do more for them?
Thank you. I believe that Secure DC, of course, has a lot of good components, but one of the main issues is the portion that talks about DNA testing. I would not be in agreement with that. Also, there needs to be a greater role with the Department of Behavioral Health. As I've mentioned in previous forums and previous discussions, there needs to be more of a partnership, more than just arresting people, more than just locking people up. There needs to be more partnership with the Department of Behavioral Health, the Department of Health. Earlier I talked about a partnership where our citizens would receive some type of incentive for joining in community policing, from joining in our officers that do neighborhood walks. There's a lot to be said for folks going with the police, going into certain areas, and then eventually everyone feels comfortable with each other. Everyone feels comfortable knowing that the police are there for them, and also they may feel more comfortable in talking to the police about certain things that are going on. It's my time. Thank you. Number 2 on the ballot.
Can we quickly repeat the question, please? It's been a bit of time. Can we repeat the question?
The Secure DC Act crime legislation may have resulted in unintended consequences. For example, the declaration of 5-day drug-free zones, even in Ward 7, has resulted in some unhoused and substance use disorder residents moving to other streets in the neighborhood, and in some cases into libraries where non-fatal overdoses and Narcan reviving have occurred in the proximity of children. What specifically would you change, alter, or delete from the Secure DC Act legislation, and what alternatives would you provide?
Yes, thank you for repeating. First thing that we must understand is that the Secure DC Act is not fully funded. So many of the provisions that are in the bill as it stands today don't have funding behind it, which means that MPD cannot enforce them. and they will not go forth. As it relates to some of the specifics of the question around drug abuse, many of the persons who are struggling with drug abuse that are homeless or housing insecure are actually veterans. And being a veteran myself and having served, I have a heart for veterans, and I understand that we cannot arrest our way out of this problem that we have across the district and in Ward 7. Our veterans are skeptical of government. We have to meet them at their greatest point of need. We have to provide housing for them, but also mental health services and wraparound services to get them reacclimated to being a part of society and a contributing member of the community. And so, as specifics, if this full bill was funded, and if the full bill were to move forward, there will be a couple of things that I would be in disagreement with. One would be the use of neck restraints. The second would be allowing officers to preview their body-worn camera before they actually write their reports. But also, we have to remember that we shouldn't put every problem-solving event and every issue on MPD. MPD has one specific goal, is to prevent, deter, and to apprehend criminals in our community. There are other professionals that have skill and the training to do what we need to do to provide services to our residents.
I'm Eben A. Allen. Again, I'm running for Ward 7 DC Council. I'm number 8 on the ballot. What we're dealing with right now is generations. Generations of poverty, generations of unemployment, generations of substance abuse, and generations of gun violence. So we have to address what's going on as far as with generations. My dad grew up in Lincoln Heights, but he died at a young age of 35 years old. My brother grew up at Benton Terrace, and he was murdered at the young age of 26. And so we got to identify what's going on as far as generations. The security DC, one thing I would address is that the DNA, like Ms. Reed talked about, is that you shouldn't profile an individual as far as the community that they live in, right? You should bring Department of Behavioral Health to have engaging conversations and dialogue with individuals. We should be working with DC agencies to provide employment opportunities. A lot of our young people are making the decisions and choices because they feel invisible. We have to make them feel visible again. They're making poor choices and bad decisions because their outcry has been ignored. And so it's very, very important that we also have intervention programs like the violence interrupter programs, not just starting at the high school level, but starting at the elementary school and middle school levels. A lot of our first and second and third graders are dealing with trauma, but that goes unnoticed, that goes unaddressed. And so we got to meet them where they are and also meet these parents where they are. I shouldn't be profiled because I live in Marshall Heights or I grew up with the guys that went to Fletcher Johnson Educational Center, which also is going to be torn down this year. So we have to wake up and we have to make sure that we look at a public safety comprehensive plan from Mayor Bowser and make sure we hold her accountable for providing these service in Ward 7. Thank you.
Are there any rebuttals? 30 seconds, please.
All right, I'll take a stab at it. I think I heard a candidate say that MPD had a mission. I think MPD has two components of their mission, which is to increase feelings of security and decrease crime. Okay, I wanted to be clear on that. Increase feelings of security, decrease crime, or reduce crime. Two things that they're supposed to do. If you feel insecure in your community, that's 30 seconds? That was quick. Okay, all right, well.
This next round,
Mr. Lane?
oh, I'm sorry, there's another rebuttal? Okay.
Just a rebuttal, but just,
Who raised their hand?
oh, Kelvin.
Okay,
Yes.
Kelvin Brown.
I just want to say, when we talked about literacy earlier and we're talking about young men and violence and talking about unhoused persons, things of this nature, you have to put your money where your mouth is and be a part of the solution. So I just want everyone to just shift their eyes to the back of the room and look at the back row right there. That is the future of our great city. If you, guys, could you stand up? Look at these gentlemen right here, 15, 16, 17 years old. That is the future of our city.
Son. It's time. It's time. Next question, please.
Okay, this is to Valerio Johnson. In the greater Washington area, the racial wealth gap is 81-1, white to black, and the income gap is 3-1, white to black. What two policy, not practice, but policy solutions will you champion to close these gaps for Ward 7 residents? Please provide one for men and one for women. I can repeat it twice, so no one can say I didn't say it twice.
That's fine.
Are you ready? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. All right. We had 2 minutes on this one, or 30 seconds? 1 minute, 30 seconds. 90 seconds. All right, good. You want to say it again? That's fine. Yeah. You want to say
So
it
that
again?
no one will say they didn't hear it. In the greater Washington area, the racial wealth gap is 81 to 1 white to black, and the income gap is 3 to 1 white to black. What are two policy solutions, not practice, that you will champion to close these gaps for Ward 7 residents? Please provide one for black men and one for black women.
I don't think the income gap is centered around gender. I think we need to look at it in terms of family and household. I think the Ashland model in North Carolina was a good model, as well as following the lead of Georgetown. If you don't know what those two models are, it is centered in the principle of reparations. We have to look at how we got to this place. Black folks are inferior. They're not making less money because they're inferior or because they're black. They're making less money because the system doesn't afford them the opportunities to make more money. And then we also have to look at how money has been transferred in our communities or outside of our communities, and we have to acknowledge the impact of chattel slavery to the American economy. We also got to look at changing laws around investments in small businesses, changing laws around educating our young people with real investments in schools like school hubs, school communities, so that we can get the wraparound services. And two, we got to do more with multi-generational wealth passing and creation. I don't know how much time I have. 10 seconds. All right, okay. All right, I'll let it go for that one. I'll come back to it.
I believe, to begin with, one thing that can really assist in closing the gap is vocational education and trades education in our schools, so more individuals will see hope for their future rather than having to go to college to achieve what they want. They can, someone out of high school, if they have the proper vocational education, can come out of high school and make more than a college graduate. And this goes for men and women. There are men, out on construction sites, but there are women there now. There are women doing the same things beside the men on these construction sites. Ms. Stiles is here. She's a big advocate of that, and she and Reverend Motley have the Jobs Not Guns job program for people to come and try to get jobs and training to go into various professions. And hopefully more concentration will be put into our vocational and trades programs so that everyone will see a hope for their future.
So here's one that's that I think is very, very interesting, is that I totally agree with Ms. Reed here around we have to approach it from both ends of the spectrum. And what I mean by that is that from a very young age, we must provide opportunities and resources for our younger people to pursue different pathways outside of college. And if, for example, with my role with Fannie Mae, I have 2 pilot projects, one in Birmingham, Alabama called Build Up, where it's a vocational education school that offers kids a high school diploma, but also they graduate with a license in one of the trades, and they have access to a 0% interest mortgage through the Atlanta Federal Reserve Bank to buy their first home and start and create generational wealth. So when we talk about income inequality, we must innovate and bring forth innovative solutions that are going to reach our kids where they are, put money in their pocket in high school, which is going to help with the public safety aspect of it. And then on the end of the spectrum, we know the displacement is impacting our families and our communities and breaking up culture across the district. So here's a policy that I want to put forth when it comes to making sure housing is affordable and stable for our families. For seniors that are 65 plus and have lived in the District of Columbia that are considered to be housing cost burden, I want to introduce legislation called the Senior and Military Veteran Disability Act of 2025 that cuts property tax for seniors 65 plus and disabled veterans based on their VA service rate and disability.
I know one thing for sure, that education will eradicate poverty. And we're not always just talking about just traditional education. Ms. Reed talked about career, technology, and education. We shouldn't just be honing in on the high schools, but we should be talking about the middle schools. And so Winston campus is vacant right now. And so we should maybe provide a STEAM middle school, science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics. If a young man could carjack someone, then that young man should be able to find other alternatives to get certification, apprenticeships, and programs that'll make a difference. And also providing programs for our young ladies. I believe the recreational centers should extend their time. They closed too early. In Bennett Park, the therapeutic centers right now is using that facility from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. So what does that do for the rest of the residents? They have nowhere to go. They have idle time. Idle time becomes the devil's workshop. So we must change that. And also, you're talking about bringing financial literacy to the middle schools and also the high schools to be able to educate our young people. Spelman College right now is probably $50,000 a year. My alma mater, Morehouse College, is $50,000 a year. A lot of our young people, they're not going to be able to go to college. So what are some other alternatives for them? Is meet them where they are. As a councilman, I want to have an advisory board, youth advisory board, because no one is talking to the youth. We feel like we have all the answers when we don't. Thank you very much.
So how are we going to get more money in Ward 7 residents' pockets? As we know, the average income in Ward 7 right now is about $40,000. We have the second highest poverty rate in the city, the second highest childhood poverty rate in the city. What have I done on this issue already? I created the Ward 7 Dream Grants program when I worked at the council. That program, you can apply to it right now. For Ward 7 residents, it gives you a grant up to $10,000 to start a small business or to help an existing small business. As we know, in Ward 7, 30% of our residents graduated college, but about the same number of residents, 30%, have started college but haven't completed it. So I want to create a program that helps people complete their college degrees online, to get more people to finish the college that they've started. We also need to focus for our women, our moms. We need to have guaranteed payments, baby bonds for certain moms to give them a certain amount of money every month that is restricted free so they can use it in the way that they want to use it. But as it relates to jobs, my vision is an incubator, an opportunity hub in Ward 7 where we can make sure we have accelerators, we have funding to help people start their businesses. But also we're not taking advantage of things like the federal government being here. We need to connect people to the federal government. I also have the idea of making the Summer Youth Employment Program a year-round program for thousands of our teenagers. And for our disconnected adults under the age of 30, I want a subsidized, guaranteed jobs type program for them. Do I have 30 seconds or am I done?
You have 5 seconds left.
Okay.
Can I clarify? When I raise my hand, you have 15 seconds left.
Okay. That's great to know. And then like everyone else said, there's a lot of skills that we can teach that don't require a college degree, that does demand a high wage, like digital marketing, like IT. We need to focus our career and technical training on those type of high wage careers. Thank you.
Are there any rebuttals? Okay, next question.
And just a reminder, for this round, you will have 45 seconds to respond. You have 45 seconds to respond. These are targeted questions to specific candidates. So my questions are going to Mr. Fleming and Mr. Johnson. So in your responses, you indicated that parents should demand literacy for their children, and that it was a parent's responsibility, and that you wanted for them to support increased literacy, that they needed to demand it. So my question to you all, if elected to council, what specific steps will you take to aid parents in increasing literacy in their homes for themselves and their children? Again, if elected to council, what specific steps will you take to aid parents in increasing literacy in their homes for themselves and their children?
Thank you. I think that's an excellent question. I only have 45 seconds. So they have these programs called home nurse programs, and they're really targeted, and they're used most in Ward 7 and Ward 8, where new mothers get a visit regularly every month from a nurse that can help them connect them to services. I would like to expand that program because connecting with nurses has proved to increase educational and literacy outcomes for them youth. But also we have to fully fund the Birth to 3 Act at the council. That act fully funds child care and early childhood intervention funds, regardless of your median income, and that's the key. We have to get our children young, and then we move them to pre-K, and then we move them through our school system.
Just a point of clarity, I demand literacy for my son. I expect and assume competence from all young people, and I believe that if we stabilize households, we can create nurturing environments that will make reading a priority. I think the mayor in this budget, 2022, has the Career Map program, and they use the federal funding to grow that program, which offers parents the pathway. They take a multi-generational approach where they support the child and the caregiver, because it may not be a parent, it could be a grandparent. But the caregiver and the child are infused with resources to do more on the trajectory for reading and career.
Thank you.
I have a targeted question, but this is a yes or no question for all candidates. I have 2 targeted questions. I'll ask the first one now, and the second one when we go into the second round of targeted questions. My first targeted question is, if you win the primary, would you commit, this is for all candidates, yes or no, if you win the primary, would you commit to publicly supporting a call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, yes or no? I will start with Kelvin Brown, and we'll go down the line.
Yes.
Say it loud and proud. Did I hear a yes from all candidates? Yes. Okay.
Okay, I have targeted questions for Nate, Valerio, and Denise. The first one, Nate, you have consistently said in multiple forums that I've attended that you brought BARD to Ward 8. I noticed today you changed it to Southeast. Can you be specific about the role you played in bringing BARD to Ward 8? And if you brought it to Ward 8, why didn't you bring it to Ward 7 since you're a Ward 7 resident?
Ms. Dean, aren't you in charge of the Education Council? You should be aware that Bard Early College High School started in Ward 7. We brought it to Ward 7. And what was my role? I ran for the council, and in Newark, I heard of a program called Bard Early College, where students in 4 years not only earned their high school degree, but they earned their associate's degree. And so when I became a council staffer, the first thing I noticed that there was a new Bard College in Baltimore. So the first thing I did within the first week was schedule a visit for my council member to go out to Baltimore to see how Bard Early College ran. When we got there, we met with the administrators, and they said, we're looking to come to DC. Can you be a champion for that? And we were a champion for that. And we brought Bard Early College High School. It started out on Texas Avenue. Then they got a fully modernized building that's now in Ward 8. So that's the only school in 7.
That's time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Time.
My apologies. Thank you.
Time.
Thank you,
and
Marlon.
Then the next question. Oh, okay. Oh, we're going to
These are not yes or no questions, but I'm looking for a specific, so it's an or question. So I'll give you read the question. In your opinion, and this is for all the candidates, in your opinion, what's more important for Ward 7 residents right now? Improving affordable housing, increasing literacy, bringing healthy food options, or ensuring safe streets? Again, I'll repeat the question. In your opinion, what is more important for Ward 7 residents right now? Improving affordable housing, increasing literacy, bringing healthy food options, or ensuring safe streets. And again, this is for all of the candidates. And we'll start with Ms. Reed.
Safe streets, that's the first thing that comes up with everyone I talk to. Safe streets, that's the first thing that comes up with everyone I talk to.
Safe streets as well.
All right, my second question, bullet round. And we will begin with Eben Allen. Pick an opponent, and in one word or sentence, describe a good quality of that opponent. Do not pick an opponent that has already been chosen. So the rest of the candidates will have to choose someone that already hasn't been chosen. So you have to choose one of the candidates and name a good quality of that candidate. On your panel. On your panel.
I would say Kelvin Brown. I've seen that he's worked very, very hard and diligent in the Hillcrest and Penn Branch community, and I definitely have applauded his work within his community. Thank you.
I would applaud Eben. Eben went to Morehouse with me. Eben was a senior when I was a freshman, but he was a good man. He always made sure he took care and talked to all the young DC natives that was at Morehouse, and he's continued that to the community. He has a real heart for community service.
That leaves Nate and Denise, right? This is my sorority sister right here, A5. But I want to talk about Nate. Nate, I've grown to know Nate. He's a brilliant person, and he does understand how to maneuver through the legislative process.
Well, the only candidate that I really know is Mr. Johnson. I can say that Mr. Johnson has been a great father, a dedicated father to his son. He's passionate about our community, but I still think he has a lot more to learn. And I've told him that for years. Have I not?
Did you tell him I gave you a ride over here?
His friend gave me a ride over here. Thank you.
Look at that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That was a good.
I don't know
that
how
was
to
a
top
good
that.
one. Oh, Calvin, you haven't gone yet. I'm sorry.
I have to break the rule because I would say I know I can't pick Eben again, but I know that Eben does really good work in his community as well, and I like the fact that he centered his core of his work around students.
Thank you. The next targeted question, this one is for Valerio. In a questionnaire for another, you wrote about seeding power and seeding community wealth building. Can you please give your framework for community wealth building? What does that mean, and what would you do?
45 seconds.
All right. I think the greatest way. Sorry. Can you reset it?
Yeah, I got you.
The fastest way for you to build wealth outside of the lottery or getting hit by an Amazon truck or something like that is to really leverage an asset like a home or apartment or some property. What we need to do to expedite our family's wealth over 2-3 generations is to consolidate and share resources. So if I have a 4-bedroom house, I bring my cousins in, all right, 15 seconds. I bring my cousins in and we stack our income. We have to look at the median household income, not by individual earner, but collective earning and then we trade those resources to invest in the next person. Other communities do it when they come over here. That's why other country natives are coming over here, outpacing us as African Americans.
And then the last targeted question I have is for Denise. Denise, and a questionnaire for another forum. You wrote that reparations is not an issue to be addressed by the Council of the District of Columbia, yet, and it should be a federal issue in the U.S. Congress and courts. Yet, many states and cities are actually involved in this effort, including California, Evanston, Illinois, and others, and have actually granted reparations or have standing task forces. Why do you take the position that this is a federal issue and not a local one?
Because we do not have federal authority. Even our delegate does not have voting in Congress. The council can appeal to Congress on this issue and certainly should, but we do not have the authority to actually administer reparations.
We're going to go to audience questions right now. I'm going to recognize elder, tenant associations, presidents, and presenters. Would all those from ETAP please stand? Would all those from ETAP please stand? Give them a hand. Please come forward and ask your question, and could you give them that mic?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. And I'm one of the co-founders. My question statement is, seniors are one of the most vulnerable populations in Ward 7, living in poor housing conditions in our senior buildings. Our senior buildings are infested with mice, rodents, mold, broken fire panels, doors, gates, and more. Would you be willing to work with us to develop or sponsor a bill that addresses upkeep and upgrading of these properties to alleviate these inhumane living conditions?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they can all answer. They each have 45 seconds to answer, and we can start with Eben Allen, and we'll go down the line.
Yes, I would say yes. I would strongly support that. I recall when my grandparents moved to Marshall Heights in the 1950s, and we're far removed as far as how we're being able to protect our seniors, to making sure they have their needs addressed. Also working with the DC agencies and Department of Aging to be able to make sure to hold them accountable. And also when you're talking about the other agencies with DPW, when you're talking about our seniors feeling safe, you know, and also being able to talk to the associations and be able to meet with you all to maybe come up with a wish list on how we can address your issues and how can we solve those issues. Thank you.
That's an excellent question. Part of the problem is these developers and these landlords are pricing the cost of fines into the cost of doing business. And one of the things, I worked at the council to create a 3 strikes and you're outlaw that has not passed the council. Essentially, once you get 3 types of strikes for having roaches and rats and infestations, we need to give you a super fine that really hurts your business. I also believe in creating a senior outreach team. My mom passed in November, and as you get older, you get isolated. So just like we're knocking on doors trying to get votes, I will have a team out there knocking on doors, connecting seniors to services and information to keep them connected. Thank you.
Ms. B, if I can share, before running for office, before having a title, the work that I did with you at Triangle View. The management failed to give you all the proper curve cut so you could have ADA access, right? A lot of residents at Triangle View could not, I guess, jump the curb because there was no ramp to get to Metro Access. Before becoming a candidate, before having purview as an ANC commissioner over Triangle View or anything, I was just a regular guy, and you brought me your problem, and we worked on it. It took a long time, 4 years. It took a long time of fighting with their management company. 15 seconds left. I would legislate that there will be a mandate that those management companies must respond and deliver a result.
Absolutely, I'd be willing to work with you, meet with you, tour the facility with you, and also I would demand that the management accompany us on that tour, and we can point out specifically what the issues are. There's no excuse, and as you said, seniors are some of our most vulnerable of our neighbors, in addition to children. And often seniors have their grandchildren around them, and it's totally wrong that these issues aren't being addressed properly. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So one of the first thing I would say is that housing is a human right, and everyone has deserved access to safe, equitable, affordable housing, no matter where they live, regardless of the geography. But then I'll come back and say, as an ANC commissioner, I'm working on one of those issues right now with the tenants of Nash Place Southeast, where we're bringing out DOH to abate rodent infestation and other mechanical issues to their apartment that we're working through to solve for. And we're 50% done with that. So in long or the short, I would absolutely partner with you to make sure that this is an issue is taken care of for the seniors. And then one of the things that I mentioned earlier around housing, when I talk about housing, I'm talking about the housing continuum, right? And then also knowing that seniors are our most vulnerable populations, as council member, I want to introduce legislation that cuts property taxes for seniors 65 plus that live in the District of Columbia, that frees up income for them for medication, for transportation, for home improvement.
This time.
That's going to keep our residents in place in the District of Columbia.
Excuse me, nope. Now we will go to, if you raise your hand and say you want a rebuttal, yes, you have a rebuttal. Actually, no. In audience, I said it in the rules. In the audience questions, we said no rebuttal. Okay, all right. So we will now go to communities respecting everyone's will to survive. It was a representative from Cruz. Please step forward to the microphone. You will have your second question on the second panel.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, that was a flat question, or this is not a general question for the audience?
There were specific organizations that we wanted to call on to make sure that they had a voice.
I have a two-part question. Do one first, and then we'll come back to the second one.
Let's hear your first part, Larry.
My first part is, the mayor signed a new law bill that will incarcerate our youth. Are you aware of the bill, and do you agree with it? Would you explain your point of view?
45 seconds. And we will begin with Denise Reed.
The mayor signed a new law bill that will incarcerate our youth. Are you aware of the bill, and do you agree with it? Would you explain your point of view?
Well, I believe it depends on what my apology. I believe it depends on exactly what the crime is, and I need to know more details about what the bill, what bill you're speaking of. But if it involves juveniles, it really needs to take a close look. It's not necessarily, the punishment should fit the crime. So it's not going to be a broad brush. I would have to know more about the bill of which you speak.
Thank you for the question, sir. I think you may be talking about the Secure DC bill that just was signed into law. As I mentioned earlier today, many parts of the bill is not funded at this point, which means that it will not go into law fully enforced into law by MPD. But as it relates to what parts of the bill that I do not agree with, as I mentioned, collecting DNA before someone is actually convicted and found guilty, I don't agree with. The utilization of neck restraints, I do not agree with, and allowing officers to preview body-worn video camera before they write their reports.
To Eben.
That's an excellent question. Again, I need to see the public safety comprehensive plan. That's very, very important. And also, I know one thing, we do have to hold our youth accountable, but I believe that we have to identify and support our parents. We need to support our schools. We need to support our public safety organizations. We need to support the returning citizen organizations. We need to support fatherhood organizations, because what's happening is a lot of our young boys are in fatherless homes. And so that's a conversation that nobody's ever talking about. Nobody on city council is supporting father organizations and male organizations. That makes the world of a difference. So yeah, Mayor Bowser has to show me a public safety comprehensive plan. That makes sense.
I'll tell you what I do agree with. I believe if you commit a crime carrying a gun, that you need to be held accountable. And I don't care what age you are, you got enough common sense to know that you shouldn't be using a gun. And we need to send a message in our community that's a problem that we will not put up with. It's a problem that we will not tolerate. So that's why I feel about accountability as it relates to crimes with guns. I believe our young people still we need to reach out to them and connect them to a jobs program that's specifically tailored to court-involved youth. So we do job training, we do work readiness, but we also do behavioral therapy to make sure that we're capturing and connecting our young people to wraparound services. But when they commit crimes with guns, we need to be serious in our response.
Starting to sound like me more and more. Hey, no, we don't lock up young people. We lock up criminals and violent offenders. We don't play. We don't live in a society that tolerates harming law-abiding citizens. And they need to be sat down, and they need to be in a different environment where they can get a different set of supports and services. I'm a product of a Divergent program. I sold drugs as a teenager. And getting locked up was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it moves me into an environment where I got access to a teacher who cared about me, where I got access to coaches that cared about me, and I ended up in college 4 years later. So yes, criminals, violent offenders, we lock them up.
We will now, Larry, your second part, we will ask for you to do that on the second panel. So we're going to close right now, so okay. Stick around. We will now move to closing statements. Each candidate will receive 1 minute for their closing statement. We will begin with Kelvin Brown.
Thank you to all of the organizations for planning this event. My name is Kelvin Brown. I'm running for the Ward 7 council member seat. One thing that we know, a few things that we know, is that crime continues to devastate our communities across Ward 7. Housing continues to be unaffordable for so many working class families that want to call DC home. Our education system does not support our kids or provide the opportunities they need to be the best version of themselves. Our healthcare system is non-existent and does not have the supports to support our most vulnerable in our community. And as I mentioned earlier, every day that I talk to residents at their doorstep or at their kitchen tables, the sentiments remain the same. They're looking for true leadership that is experienced. Not just local leadership, but leadership that has seen the world and seen different viewpoints, and it's going to be willing to innovate and be transparent and bring about real solutions that are going to be lasting and not reactionary. And so on November 13th, I did file to run for the Ward 7 council member seat, because I truly believe that many of our politicians before all of us have come and sold a bag of goods and not told the truth about the state of things and where we are as a community.
That's time.
And so we need a leader that's going to put our communities forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Again, thank you to the organizers. Thank you to my pastor, Lucius Dalton. Yes, this is my church. We appreciate the time and effort that was put into planning this. We wish that we could have all been on one panel together. I think you would have gotten a different point of view had you seen all of the candidates together. But I digress. I have told you about my many years of service to the district. I have 16 years of service to CSOSA, the Court Services and Offender Supervision Agency, from which I retired on January 11th, and I filed my candidacy for this job on January 12th because I felt the candidate pool was lacking. I look forward to serving as your council member. I hope you will vote for me on June 4th. I'm number 2 on the ballot, and I thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Thank you.
This process has been a transformative process for me. My colleagues have made it possible for me to be bigger, better, bolder. They've challenged me to think about things differently and to move and respond accordingly. What do you know about VJ? You know he's capable, he's competent, and he's committed. What do you trust about VJ? That he gets the job done. He's been getting the job done, whether he has a title or not. He's been doing it for over 2 decades. What do you like about VJ? You can depend on him, because you know that I'll stand up for you, as I've been doing as Ward 7 residents, making sure that you get your needs met. You've heard it here today without even me bragging on it. Things that I do from the kindness of my heart, because I'm built for service, and this is my purpose, to do this good work and to continue this good work. And it's your job to elect me to be the next Ward 7 council member, so I can continue building bridges and connecting people to what they need and what they want. Thank you.
That was a good word that was just used, purpose. What's your purpose? I was a young kid, grew up in this community. I talked about it. I read every book that I could read. 2 quotes that always stuck by me. Knowledge is power, and our people perish for a lack of what? Knowledge, right? Guess what I did? I went and acquired knowledge. Went from Southeast to Morehouse College, Berkeley, Harvard, and Penn. I didn't do it to collect degrees. I did it to collect knowledge to serve you. This work that your next council member will do is complex. It's hard. It's difficult. Lives are on the line. And you want someone there that has the expertise, that's been working since they were a young person. I worked for Eleanor Norton when I was 16. Got elected to be D.C. Shadow Representative to Congress at 28. I turned 40 this year. The track record of service that no one can question, that's the type of work that I can build upon for you. This election is not about me. This election is about none of these other candidates. It's about you and who can best deliver results for you. And in this race, there's one candidate that has proven that they have the commitment and the ability to deliver results for you, and I believe that's me. My name is Nathan Fleming. I humbly ask for your vote, and I hope that you can work with us to advance our ward and move it to the position that we need it to be in. Thank you.
One, I would like to thank the organization for hosting this awesome event. I want you to think about 2 words. One word is forgotten, and the other word is endurance. Forgotten. Some of you guys might have forgotten about Carmelo Duncan. Carmelo Duncan was the 1-year-old that lost his life on Southern Avenue. I have 3 sons that we reside in Marshall Heights. And so I want to make sure when I'm thinking in the next 5 to 10 or 15 years, what will Ward 7 look like within the next 5 or 10 or 15 years? Carmelo Duncan was forgotten, but I haven't forgotten about him. And you shouldn't forget about him, because these are the things that causes us trauma and causes why some of the things are not connected within our communities. Also, we talk about endurance. I know my time is almost up, but it took me 5 to 6 years to get the Woody Ward Recreational Center to the Bennett Park community. And so I worked with Mayor Bowser and Councilman Gray to make sure that dream came to fruition. Again, I'm number 8 on the ballot for this great, awesome race. Don't forget about me. My website is www.ebba7.com. Thanks again for your time.
Could we please give all of the candidates a round of applause? On behalf of Million Man Vote, we certainly congratulate the candidates and wish them well. Thank you so much. We will have our second panel come up as soon as they depart from the dais. And you can get them.
Okay, we're ready to begin our second panel. The first candidate to come up will take the first seat right here is Ebony Rose Thompson. The next seat is Vita Rashid. The next seat is Ebony Payne. And then the final seat is Wendell Felder. Thank you.
Please, if you can, take a minute, stand up, stretch, and then come on back and take your seats. We're going to get started. And let me explain so that everybody understands. So when we first organized these panels, we had invited 4 candidates. Due to the need to hear everybody's voice, we decided that we would invite the other candidates as well. We wanted to make sure that this, being our first candidate forum, reflected not only people's voice, but also the community's voice. This is what we're organizing for. This is what Million Man Vote is about. We are trying to organize on the ground people power. That's why we have 26 different organizations that have sponsored this event. We can no longer be in a posture where we elect candidates and members of the council who do not hear the people. We're done with that. So we are organizing on the ground. So this is our first time doing this, but what we're planning for, quite frankly, is 2026. In 2026, we will be in full effect impacting elections, especially talking about the issues that affect black men and families, which is an issue that is hardly ever talked about by the candidates. We're serious about what we do, and that is why we are having the second panel as well. So please stick around. If you haven't signed in, please sign in. And those that are interested in working with Million Man Vote can see me afterwards. It's not just about elections. It's about providing the opportunities and providing change for our communities. Are they ready? All right. Those that are in the back, if you could come and have a seat, please. The rules? Yeah, I'm going to restate them. Yep. I'm going to restate the rules. Those that are at the back, please come on in. You know who I am. You know who I am. All right. Rules for this debate. Shh. Each participating candidate's name will be announced at the beginning of the forum that was done. Each candidate will receive 2 minutes for an opening statement. Each candidate will take turns answering moderator questions first, with candidates to their right answering next. We will start with Carmel Henry again. Candidates will have 90 seconds to answer the moderator's question. After all candidates have answered the moderator's question, each candidate will have an opportunity to rebut the answer another candidate gave only on the question asked by the moderator. The rebuttal time cannot exceed 30 seconds. Only one rebuttal is permitted. Rebuttals cannot be in the form of a question. Candidates may not rebut more than one other candidate's answer. After rounds of questions from the moderators, rounds of audience questions will be taken by the lead moderator. Round 1 will be questions from specific community representatives, and round 2, time permitting, will be from general audience members. Candidates' answers to audience questions shall not exceed 45 seconds. After the audience questions, there will be a bullet or targeted round from moderators. Candidates will have no rebuttal during audience question rounds. Candidates will then have 1 minute for closing remarks. And during the bullet or target rounds, candidates will require a yes or no answer or be no longer than 15 seconds on their answer, depending upon the question. Does everybody understand? Okay, let's get started.
Before we start this round of questions, we will start with each candidate having 2 minutes for opening remarks. We'll start with you.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Ebony Rose Thompson. I'm happy to be back at Mount Moriah because I have family who attend Mount Moriah, so this is a comfortable place for me to be in. I think the thing you really want to know about a candidate is what decisions they make, what filter they make their decisions through. For me, I make no apologies about the fact that I'm a fifth-generation Washingtonian who is engaged to a no-generation Washingtonian, and we care about what will happen and if there will be a sixth generation of Washingtonians. One of the things I've been very involved in the ward is education. And that's because professionally, I've been in a lot of spaces where folks say, no one is from DC. And it's not because no one is from DC, it's because no one in their professional and social circles are from DC. Which also means it's one of the reasons many of us are not struggling to make it out of DC, many of us are struggling to make it back to DC. It's for those reasons I care about how we balance economic development with housing and how we're welcoming new amenities. It's for that reason why I care about health and how we manage that moving forward. It is for that reason that I care about public safety because none of the things I said before you matter if folks are not safe in their communities. And so I look forward to answering your questions today. I look forward to talking to you about my experience, not only as the president of the State Board of Education, but as a 3-term ANC who served 6 years and helped help revitalize the rec center I went to as a kid. And so thank you for all the organizers today. If I don't get a chance to say it later, and I believe.
15 seconds.
Oh, perfect timing.
So good afternoon, Ward 7. My name is Vita Rashid. I stand before you today. If you would have saw me in 2020 and asked me did I ever think that I would be running for an elected office, I would tell you absolutely not. What happened was I got a phone call from my children's school because a bullet had went through their classroom window. And from that point, I took action. I started making calls. I started showing up at ANC meetings. I would talk to anybody that would listen to me because I wanted to make sure that my child was getting to and from school safely. And from that came a lot of things. I began to serve my community as advisory neighborhood commissioner. And one of the things that I'm happy that I did when I was at ANC was bring the Cure the Streets program, advocating for that in 2018 to come to different communities because public safety was something that I held to my heart. Also, when I had the opportunity to clerk as a law clerk on the Commission on Human Rights, what I noticed is that people that were coming home, they didn't have an opportunity to get an education. They were not able to get jobs, and they were not able to get housing. So what I did was I partnered with every law school in the District of Columbia, the CJA attorneys, PDS, and I did record sitting and expungement clinics right here in Ward 7. When you talk about young people, I was a young mom, so I know how important it is to have supports. One of the things that I started in my own community was Young Ladies on the Rise with Tia Bell, who now has Trigger Project. And what we did at the Ridge Road Community Center, we talked to young ladies that were ages 6 to 14 years old, but we didn't leave them out. We talked to them and empowered them and let them know that they can be anything that they wanted to be. Growing up, I never saw an attorney in my community. I have 13 siblings. I'm the first one to go to college, the only one to graduate and have a law degree, an advanced degree. And what did I do? I came right back to the community that raised me. It was some of these people that are in here that helped me with my children so that I can be a success. I had the opportunity to serve our first elected Attorney General. I have been a mayoral appointee. I've served in various roles. I've even chaired our Ward 7 Young Dems going to every high school in Ward 7. But you'll hear more about me, and I'm grateful to be here, and thank you for your time.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ebony Payne, and I am the Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner for Kingman Park, which is a community about 5 minutes away from here. Thank you very much to Million Man Vote for having me today. I'm running for Ward 7 DC Council because I, like so many people in the city, are just fed up with crime. And I would love to see us make a real investment in our young people so that we can keep them out of trouble. I want to give a big shout out to the Alliance for Concerned Men. If you are in here, please raise your hands. I so support your group and all of the initiatives. We have many unsung heroes in this room today. I've been attending your meetings, and if I wasn't on the campaign trail, I would be attending every Wednesday at Mosque number 4. But I've learned so much from all of you and really appreciate the work that you're doing with our young people to keep them out of trouble. I am also running because I'm very passionate about solving the food desert and our health disparities in Ward 7. Outside of my political life, I make herbal loose leaf teas. I come from a health and wellness background, which I'm very proud of. I took a vocational path after high school, and so it was really nice to hear all of the candidates be big proponents of vocational education, because I know that that made such a huge difference in my life as a young person. I was able to start my first business at the age of 20 and became a productive member of society, and I can see that in the future for our youth. We are also in the shadows of RFK Stadium, and I am the ANC commissioner who fought hard to keep my community in Ward 7 so that we would all have a seat at the table. We're looking at spending $500 million over the next 4 years, and we need to make sure that we're investing our DC taxpayer dollars very wisely into education, teachers, and schools. So I look forward to getting to know all of you and for you to get to know all of me. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? Good evening, everyone. My name is Wendell Felder, and I'm running to be your next Ward 7 council member because, like many of you, I too am deeply concerned with the state of our community and the future of our ward. I'm a fourth-generation proud Washingtonian, proud graduate of DC Public Schools, Bowie State, Georgetown University with a master's degree in urban and regional planning, and I bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table. Over the last decade or so, I've had the pleasure of serving in numerous leadership roles in Ward 7, whether that has been a 4-term advisory neighborhood commissioner or 2-term chair of the Ward 7 Democrats organization. Professionally, I've worked in a number of roles across the executive office of the mayor, whether that's been the Ward 7 liaison, working as a project development manager within the Deputy Mayor's Office for Planning and Economic Development, or even serving as the Deputy Chief of Staff to the City Administrator, supporting running the day-to-day operations of the district, all with one common goal: to advance the quality of life for everyday Ward 7 families like you and I. Currently, I work at Howard University as the Director of Regional Affairs, where I continue to champion the needs of our community. As your next Ward 7 council member, my biggest priorities include creating safer communities, creating inclusive economic growth, addressing our infrastructure challenges, providing more neighborhood-serving amenities, and most importantly, making sure your government works for you. I look forward to sharing more of my ideas, and I look forward to the questions that you all have been patiently waiting to ask. Thank you.
Thank you all. We'll proceed with the questions, and we'll start with you, Ms. Thompson. First question. The mayor is proposing more aggressive prosecution for teens who commit violent criminal offenses. How should the district prosecute juveniles facing violent criminal offenses? Again, the mayor is proposing more aggressive prosecution for teens who commit violent criminal offenses. How should the district prosecute juveniles facing violent criminal offenses? You will have 90 seconds to respond.
I appreciate you asking about juveniles, and I also appreciate you making a distinction around violent offenses. I think it's really important that we're working with the Office of the Attorney General, and we're working with DYRS to make sure people can be put on a rehabilitative path. The reason I say that, I don't condone violence. I think everyone should be safe from harm. I think about the young man who broke into someone's car in Brooklyn, and he was shot and killed. And when our young people are committing acts of violence, not only are they harming other people, but they're harming themselves. And we actually do have now within our authority the right to prosecute youth in the OAG's office. And we also have in our authority the right to make sure DYRS is working to put them on a path where they're not saying to folks like me, as the state board president, I've had young people say to me, if I carjack somebody today, I'll be out tomorrow. I don't want them to think that. I also don't want that to be true, because again, there has to be an intervention to set somebody on a different path. And I don't know a single 13-year-old that can't make a change. And so we need to put the systems in place to make sure they can make a change so our entire community is safe.
I would say, as someone who sat in the front row seat in the DC Superior Court in the Criminal Division, watching cases go in and out every day for over a decade, and also someone that has come out of the Attorney General's office, and also someone who children lost their brother to gunshots, shot over 25 times at 15 years old. I think we need to talk about prevention, and I think we're talking about things after the fact when our young people are going to jail. I think we also need to understand our criminal justice system and how it works. The Office of the Attorney General does prosecute our young people, but the U.S. Attorney's Office has the authority to Title 16 some of our young people if the crimes are violent. I also think when we talk about DYRS, we have to make sure that they are doing rehabilitative things, because we just don't want to keep on sending our young people to these places and then they graduate from the DYRS to the DC jail right back here at 1901 D Street. I'm a mom. I want to see investments in our young people. I know that they can do it, and if we give up on them, we're giving up on our future. For violent crimes, it is things that we can do, but I think we need to understand how our criminal justice system works. And that's my answer to that question.
I think that works. Okay. Yes, thank you for that question. So the violence amongst our youth is one of my top concerns, and making sure that we are holding our young people accountable. We cannot keep sending the message that if you commit a crime, especially a violent crime, that you'll just get away with it or we'll just let you out, because you're not only a danger to society, but you're also a danger to yourself, and you are going to be making very serious mistakes that you might never make it out of, either with your life or somebody else's, and that might be, sitting in jail for the rest of your life or you're dead. So I think of the girls who fatally attacked the man on Georgia Avenue, and they were not going to school. And so one big underlying issue with our juvenile crime is that they're not going to school. We have a major problem with chronic truancy in the city, and we need to rapidly reduce and make sure our kids are going to school every single day, because it's not only vitally important for their learning, but it's important to keep them out of trouble and make sure that they are staying away from the worst elements of society. I worry deeply about the kind of influences that these young people are coming under. It's very easy to brainwash a 15-year-old, and with social media and the clout chasing and thinking that these kind of carjackings and violent crimes are funny is something that we need to rapidly address and make sure that they think it's cool to go to school, and give them tools and skills to make them self-sufficient, especially once they enter the criminal justice system. We should be investing in education as they're in the system.
This is a very important topic. That's why my public safety platform focuses on intervention, prevention, accountability, and rehabilitation. To my colleague's point, kind of border in the middle, and I'm speaking from firsthand experience. Growing up in public housing, being a first-generation college grad, homeowner, now raising my family here, I know the many challenges that young black men has to face daily just to make it through the system, or even living in inner cities. And then I don't really talk about this, but my dad, right? I know it on all angles. My dad was incarcerated for 13 years. We have the best of the relationship, but I learned from his mistakes. And I say all that to say, our young folks, in some instances, all they need is redirection, right? They need someone to grab them, hold them, tell them they love them, pray with them. Right, it's funny, we in the church, grew up in the church, and it's the smallest things that will go the long way. But what I cannot condone is 15-year-olds pulling our elderly women off the bus, shooting in broad daylight, just wreaking havoc in our communities. I cannot stand that. So I think it's a holistic approach. We have to be balanced. And as the next Ward 7 council member, I want to do everything humanly possible to make sure our communities are safer.
Thank you. Each candidate will now have 30 seconds to rebut. If you would like to rebut. No? Okay, well, thank you. If you would like to rebut another candidate or something that one of the other candidates said.
Is this working? I have a note about the truancy. And I think it's really important to say. Nationally, truancy is up. Nationally, crime is not. And so we need to know what is happening in DC and pull the levers we can pull in DC. Now, that's not to excuse young people not going to school. But as someone who has actually talked to young people, both who are truant and who are not, some of the truant youth are not going because they also feel unsafe.
That's time.
Not because they're kitty criminals, all of them.
Any other rebuttals? Next question.
I can rebut since I think that was directed towards me. I brought up truancy. So I want to make it clear that it's important that we're not making excuses for our chronic truancy rate. And that there are many reasons why our kids are truant. Yes, sometimes they are afraid to go to school, and so the safety of our schools inside once they get there is very important. Transportation is also a number one concern. We don't have enough bus drivers, and that is a failure of our city to provide that kind of transportation so that they can get to school on time. But at the end of the day, we as the adults leading this city are responsible to make sure that our young people are given the best chance of success at life, and that starts by going to school every single day.
Thank you. Next question. The mayor has released, and we will begin with Vida Rashid. The mayor has released the fiscal year 25 budget that many advocates maintain will drastically cut social safety net programs that could substantially impact Ward 7 residents. Name one item in the budget that you feel benefits Ward 7. And two, what cuts would you advocate be restored in a final budget outcome? I'll repeat the question. The mayor has released the FY25 budget that many advocates maintain will drastically cut social safety net programs that could substantially impact Ward 7 residents. Name one item in the budget that you feel benefits Ward 7. And second, what cuts would you advocate be restored in a final budget outcome?
So what I would advocate that needs to be restored would be pay equity fund. And I think that that's important because I was a parent. I worked 3 jobs while going to law school. I know how important it is to have your kids with a responsible adult. And if we're sending our children to these individuals to watch them every day and care for them and nurture them so that we can bring them home, it's important that they're paid a livable wage so that they can treat our kids appropriately and that our kids are safe. If it was one thing that I can restore, it would be money to our schools, and I think that's important because we need to have a world-class education for each child in Ward 7. I graduated from Eastern Senior High School. I was educated at Roper Middle School by the great Helena Jones. I was educated at my community school, River Terrace. So if we're not setting our children up on the right path where they have a fully funded education for school, then how can we expect them to be successful? So that is something that I would restore.
So one thing that I have been finding very troublesome is how we are funding $500 million, more than $500 million, $515 million to be exact, for Capital One Arena, and yet we are cutting the Early Childhood Education Fund. We're cutting our neighborhood schools like Smothers is losing $1.9 million, and that is 40% of their staff. So that tells you where our priorities are lying right now, and it's not with our kids. What I do like to see in the budget is I appreciate the funding for more police. Our population has grown significantly over the past 10 years, and we have 400 vacancies for police officers. I would like to see more community-based hiring, especially for Black and brown kids and women. That would have made a really big difference in my own story and journey as an adolescent, was to have a Black female police officer to talk to when I needed it. And I'd like to see an increase in funding for our summer youth employment program. We're currently not paying the national minimum wage, and so it's not making it worth it for the kids to enroll. And that's a really big problem for us in terms of our crime, especially during the summer months when crime goes up anyways. And we really need to make sure that we have jobs for these kids that pay well so that they can stay out of trouble during the summer.
So a couple of things. Within the mayor's proposed budget for FY 2025, two things that I was excited to see. One was the allocation of $50 million to support the redevelopment of Hill East, dealing with infrastructure and the redevelopment of that site. Additionally, I was also excited to see $60 million allocated for an indoor sports complex to support our youth. We know that a lot of residents go to the fields of RFK for recreational activities, and from my conversations knocking on doors with residents have expressed to me that the same indoor facility that is over at PG Sports and Learning Complex, they would like to see something similar here in Ward 7. In terms of cuts that were in the mayor's budget that I would restore, the first thing that I would restore is the ERAP funding. It was significantly reduced. For folks who may be unaware, ERAP stands for Emergency Rental Assistance Program. We know that as families regain from, and as the city continues to figure out the short-term and long-term implications of the pandemic, we need to be able to support our families who have supported the district by staying here. Additionally, I would also restore the DC Baby Bonds program, which is a tool to generate wealth. And as a father of a beautiful 14-month-old, I would have liked to invest in that program myself. Thank you.
I think the continued funding of the Housing Production Trust Fund is really important. There is not enough money in the Housing Production Trust Fund, so I'm glad to see some money there, but we have to put all the money there that we possibly can. I think ERAP is absolutely important. I think HPAP is terribly important. When I think about my own family, I have one sister who was blessed enough to not just use HPAP, she was able to use HPAP-E because she was a government employee, and she was able to get inclusionary zoning and buy a house in Shaw. I have another sister who works really hard but is trying to figure out what affordable housing looks like for her. And fortunately, I have a friend who's going to rent to her in her condo. I know that so many of our residents are unstable in housing, and that also includes our seniors. I would love to see and will work really hard as the next Ward 7 council member to make sure we have programs like senior villages so that folks aren't climbing up on a stool to change a light bulb. And we have those things in Ward 3, they pay into them. We don't have anything like that in Ward 7 where folks can age in place. I also think those things really matter because of our senior housing communities. And a lot of that DHCD money also funds those facilities, like a Triangle View.
Yes. I'd like to rebut Mr. Wendell Felder. You brought up the fields at RFK, which I want to let everyone know here are temporary. And part of the issue that I have with your candidacy is that we cannot get a firm yes or no answer from you on whether you are for or against building a new football stadium and how you would balance the budget in terms of doing that. The fields cost $30 million to install, and we've invested significantly, but we do not have any assurances from city officials that those fields are permanent. And so one of the big reasons why I'm against a new stadium is because we have 100,000 kids every year that play on those, and that could be lost.
Thank you for your question, Ms. Payne. From being elected 6 times already in Ward 7, what I've come to notice as a leader, I don't make decisions that impact thousands of lives unless I have all the facts. And where we are with the stadium, we're not there yet. To date, there's been an administrative survey that got 2,000 responses. A lot of those responses were families who live in Maryland or Virginia who don't live in a directed community. Additionally, the mayor has come out and only had 1 community meeting. I think about it, if there was a conversation happening about RFK going to a community like the Palisades, there will be at least a year worth of community meetings. And the families in Ward 7 deserve the same thing.
Any other rebuttals? Okay, thank you. We're starting with Ms. Payne. Okay, Ms. Payne. Many Ward 7 schools suffer from under-enrollment and at risk of closing over the next decade. What will you do to strengthen Ward 7 schools so that none of them are at risk of closure? What special strategies will you use for schools like Ron Brown High School for Boys and Sousa Middle School?
Thank you for that question. Well, it starts with investment and making sure that we are fully funding our students and our teachers and the modernization of our schools, and also focusing on safety. I also want to talk about getting better, rigorous programming in our schools. There seems to be a perception that Ward 7 kids are dumb, and that's simply not the case. We have many bright students, and they're going across town to get the kind of education that really everyone deserves. And so making sure that we are expanding vocational education. I'm a big proponent for gardening education because that opens up pathways to entrepreneurship. And so making sure that we are not making any cuts over the course of the next 4 years to education. We're asking for so little in comparison to what our budget has available.
Many Ward 7 schools suffer from under-enrollment and are at risk of closing over the next decade. What will you do to strengthen Ward 7 schools so that none of them will be at risk of closure? What special strategies will you use for Ron Brown High School for Boys and Sousa Middle School?
That's a fantastic question. First and foremost, Maladine, I would be remiss if I didn't commend you for the work that you have been doing with the Education Council. As the next Ward 7 council member, there's a couple things that I would do. Number one, I want to make sure that you have funding so we could properly market the schools that we have in Ward 7. Additionally, I want to establish a education task force that is comprised of all the principals from our middle schools, elementary schools, and high schools, and they can share best practices with one another. Additionally, I think this is also a priorities issue. We had a forum earlier today in which we were joined by the chairman of the council, and I said this, and I'll say this again and again and again until I'm unequivocally clear. Any at-large council member who says that they're for the cause, they support black and brown communities, and they want everyone in here who calls Ward 7 to be home to be successful, then do me a favor. As the next Ward 7 council member, forfeit your budget priorities for the next 4 years and make sure that we get our schools funded, make sure that we get our streets clean, and make sure that we get all of our budget priorities included in the budget. Now, in terms of Susan and Ron Brown, I plan to strengthen the relationship with the principals and also be a conduit between the schools and central office of DCPS and OSSI.
I think it's really important that the next council member truly focus on fully funding and modernizing our schools. Susan is my neighborhood school now, and B, not only did I attend Ron Brown for a year, which was Roper then, but I was actually on the community cabinet to help reopen Ron Brown. I've helped modernize 3 schools in the ward already. I know what that works look like, and I know how to work with other people to get it done. I think it's also very important that we think about what fully funding looks like, whether that's making sure there's money for things like community schools, staying vigilant and making sure our schools get their share of at-risk funding. I've gone back to back to back, year after year, to get increases for Ward 7 schools. Last thing I will say to you that is really important, having a vision for education is really important. I think my mom is at the center of my vision, not because she's a teacher, but because before she was a teacher, she was actually an electrician. She is Eastern class of 80, okay? And Eastern prepared her to do anything she could possibly do in the world, and not one of those paths is lesser than the other one. She was a phenomenal person when I knew her as an electrician. She was a phenomenal person when she went back to UDC and got her degree, and she is a phenomenal person now educating our young people and making sure our schools can do both of those things and prepare all kids for the future is absolutely of the utmost importance to me and something I've been working toward for years.
So I was educated in Ward 7 schools. My son graduated from Ron Brown in 2022. I went to Roper. I graduated from there. One of the things that I'm seeing and I'm hearing over and over is teacher retention. So we need to make sure that we're investing in our teachers that come to the schools every day. Many a times my son, his teacher had changed over in the middle of the semester. It was a new teacher, somebody I didn't know, somebody I didn't meet. So we need to make sure that we're making quality investments in teacher retention all across the board, not just at Susan and Ron Brown, but all across DCPS. The second thing is we need community investment from people like you. Ms. Miller just said she went up to the school and was reading to our young people. So we have to make sure that we're showing up for our people at that school. We have to make sure that we're being present. And we have to make sure that we're sending our kids to the community schools so that they can stay open, because we keep hearing this, our schools are under-enrolled. They just were saying this at Sousa Middle School, which they're trying to close. I don't think they should close Sousa because it's a historic school. It's in the Brown versus Board of Education case. It should never be closed. It shouldn't even be considered being closed. So those are some of the things that I think we need to do, and also fully funding our schools and making sure we're making investments in technology. Some of the things that I see is the infrastructure and the technology. That's why modernization is so important. That is making sure that our kids can compete on a world-class level.
Thank you. This question will start with you, Wendell. And so you'll again have 90 seconds to respond, and then if at the end, we'll have 30 seconds for rebuttal. And we'll stick with the topic of education. If elected to council, what specific steps would you take to increase graduation rates, student enrollment, and decrease truancy in local schools? Again, if elected to council, what specific steps would you take to increase graduation rates, student enrollment, while decreasing truancy in local schools?
That's a very good question. I'll say this: education is near and dear to my heart, and I think about how I was able to transform my life. And being a parent now, I look at education through a different lens. In terms of what I would do to increase graduation rates, I was very disappointed to see in the mayor's proposed budget cuts of community-based schools. So really pushing for that. What community-based schools offer is wraparound services to our most neediest families. So for me, really pushing for that. Additionally, I'm going to fight to see what can be done to reinstate the Office of Commission on Fatherhood, Men and Boys, to really get back into schools and really working with our educational leaders and mentoring our young folks, catching them early on to show them the value of education. In terms of ensuring that graduation rates, in addition to ensuring that graduation rates are where they're supposed to be, I plan to work with DCPS, conducting school tours, pushing for home visits, and really trying to understand the need behind the need to eradicate truancy, the truancy rates in which they are. The reality is it takes a holistic approach. It takes a village. You really have to meet folks where they are. I want to bring in our ANC commissioners, our civic associations, our education councils, even our state board rep, and figure out what we can do holistically to tackle this issue head on.
There is a piece of legislation before the council initiated by Robert White. It's called Safer Today, Safer Tomorrow, and it would expand vocational education and youth mentorship. I love that approach to young people. I'm a big believer in getting our kids skills and skills-based learning so that by the time they graduate from high school, they can start their own businesses and support themselves and their families. Fairfax County schools actually are leading. So we have a model that we can look at. So they have vocational education throughout their high school experience, and by the time the kids graduate, they are ready for the job market. I'm in favor of fully funding our MPD cadet programs, and we're also short on firefighters, and there is an EMS cadet program that needs to be expanded soon, because Ward 7 is not just short on police officers, but we're actually short on firefighters as well. And then to address truancy, we have a bus driver shortage. And actually our bus drivers are supposed to pick up our disabled kids, which are our most vulnerable students. And so getting them to school on time is going to lower our chronic truancy rate. So that would be the very first thing that I would do.
So first, let me talk about graduation. Our kids have to be showing up to school first in order to make sure that they graduate, right? We have to be making sure that they're coming to school. We have to make sure that they're enrolled in school. And what does that look like? I don't believe in marketing anything to anybody. What you get is, what you see from me is what I am. I'm my authentic self. I think we should be presenting our schools that way. The same thing with the education that we're offering. I think that one thing that I learned as a My School DC representative is that people don't know enough about what school choice is, what school option is, and what that looks like. We have many great schools all across the city. We have great schools right here in Ward 7, but what we need to do is making sure that people know about it and what it looks like. I can tell you from my personal experience, what I did was I sent my kids right around the corner to the school that was closest to me. Had I learned about school option and school choice early on, I probably would have sent my children to a bilingual school so that they can learn more than one language. And that's why I was so strong in advocating for that and coming to my community, volunteering my time to talk to any parent and family that would listen about what school choice meant and looked like. Because if your child is at a school that they like, they'll continue to go there and they will graduate. We talk about student enrollment. I think that starts in the home. We have to have that starts in the home, and we need to start talking to families more, right? When I was an intern with the School Board of Education, I think they still have it now, they had a student chamber and a parent chamber where you talk to families every day about different things. I think that increases student enrollment in our schools. And then we're talking about...
That's time.
It is? I didn't see you. Okay.
I really appreciate you all asking about high school graduation. I think a couple things are true. One, our high school graduation rates are up. We're at about 75%. Now, that's not to say they're high enough. I think what we really need to be worried about is the quality of that education we are graduating students with. I told you in my previous response, My mom is my beacon on education. It's both, it's like being prepared for the world, whatever she wanted to do, whether it be vocational or taking a college path. That is not actually something we are seeing yet. I think what I would do as the next council member is continue to build on the work I've already done. So one, we have literacy recommendations that we've delivered along with OSSI to the council and saying, please fully fund these literacy recommendations, because what we know right now is too many of our adults are illiterate. And they graduated from our schools that way. That is unconscionable, okay? We cannot have another generation of young people who leave our schools diploma in hand, who cannot read, okay? And so while the council has the power to fund things, the council has the power to do priorities, that has to be a priority. In Ward 7, we have the highest rate of illiteracy. 2, I mentioned to you all community schools. That's work I'm already doing with the WTU. We've sent letters. Kimball now will be fully funded as a community school, and that's despite OSSI cutting community schools in the budget. And so I'm committed to seeing that through as an evidence-based solution for truancy.
Any rebuttals? Okay, we'll move to the next question. In the District of Columbia, as well as in Ward 7, black males have the highest rates of incarceration, the highest rates of unemployment, the highest rates of opioid use, and the lowest rates of graduation of any demographic group. What current resources will you apply, or what new resources will you create to address and change these outcomes? Starting with Ebony Rose Thompson.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? Black
Yes.
males, highest rates.
In the District of Columbia, as well as in Ward 7, black males have the highest rates of incarceration, the highest rates of unemployment, the highest rates of opioid use, the lowest rates of graduation of any demographic group. What current resources will you apply, or what new resources will you create to address and change these outcomes?
I already told you all about the quality of what we're preparing our people to do. I think that's really important. One of the reasons I was involved in Ron Brown High School was because that was DCPS's opportunity to say we are going to do better by brown and black boys. And we're not there yet. We currently are graduating folks, and I told you in my opening statement, I'm in a lot of spaces where folks say to me, no one is from DC. No one is from here. Because we're actually not prepared to take on the careers that allow us to use this place like a playground like the people I graduated from college do. We also are not supporting people with stable housing. We are not doing a great job with health care. We're not doing a great job with any of the things, any of the social determinant things you look at, and black males are at the bottom of that list. And so as we prioritize our budget, as we prioritize our policies, actually looking at people as whole people and getting them what they need, not just to survive, but to thrive, is absolutely important to me. Because what I know is too many black males and too many other people are in survival mode. And we have to get people out of survival mode so they don't end up on pathways to incarceration.
I thank God that he had a hand on my children, and that my son was able to make it out the street alive. His brother didn't. But what I can tell you is that when I was a law clerk at the Commission on Human Rights, what I saw is that people were coming there every day because they couldn't get a job, they couldn't get housing, they couldn't get a loan for education. And one of the legislative things that I did was work on policy for banner box legislation that was actually passed through the council. And what I did was I set up record sitting and expungement fairs right in my community in Ward 7 at Ridge Road Recreation Center, where I brought every law school there, where I brought the Criminal Justice Act attorneys there, where I brought PDS there to make sure that people can get their records sealed so that they will have an opportunity to get a job, where they will have an opportunity to get housing, where they will have an opportunity to get employment. And I think that those things are important because once people are incarcerated, once they come home, it's like they're serving a second sentence. And I know this firsthand because I sat and I watched some of those same people cycle in and out of our court system daily. So when we're talking about investments in our school, this is serious, and we need it. And it's serious because we need to make sure that we're putting on people for a pathway, not to prison, but a pathway to be a business owner, to be a great person in their community. Thank you. 15 seconds. Okay. To be a great person in their community, and just to make sure that they have a fresh start. I think all too often people are criminalized, and when we talk about the Secure DC bill and we talk about these different communities, some people don't even have a place to live, so that's why they're standing outside. So then we're going to put them in jail, and now they don't have an opportunity to get housing or a job or employment. We're just creating a cycle.
I think it's worth repeating just my proponency for vocational education. I do think that if by teaching kids real skills that they can use in the job market and to start their own businesses, I do think we will turn the corner on crime over the long haul. We also need to be reaching our kids who are in the juvenile criminal system. Especially now, and especially at a time when we are seeing more people call for prosecution of kids. There is currently a lawsuit against the city because we are denying kids in the criminal justice system their right to an education. That's an issue. So we need to make sure that we are increasing our funding and our resources to make sure that the kids who are currently locked up are receiving a real education so that they're not falling behind, so that when they come out, they are with their peers and can actually still be productive members of society. And that includes targeting the DC jail for those kind of educational resources. And really we should be including our vocational education expansion into the criminal justice system as well, so that when people are returning to our communities, they can fully embrace freedom and become productive members of our society.
You know, I love this question because I'm a black man, and I think about my path and my journey, and I think about individuals who may not have had the same opportunities that I've gotten, which means that I have an obligation to them. And the reality is, in this city, if you're a black man, a single black man, you have limited opportunities. Think about it, whether you're trying to get housing, if you don't have a child, you can't get housing. In the workforce, there's different categories. You got the young professional black man, you got the everyday black man, you got folks who move to the city to be educated, and it's different levels. I think for me, how do we eradicate some of these challenges or barriers? The first thing that I would do is work closely with the newly established Office of Poverty. You talked about some of the social determinants, but also a lot of black men, we experience poverty due to unemployment. A lot of this is systemic as well. So trying to figure out what we can do from a holistic point to kind of break through some of these challenges. Additionally, I mentioned this before, meeting folks where they are. Frederick Douglass said that it's harder to repair black men than to invest or to repair black boys, something along the lines. I think I said it right. And nonetheless, I say all that to say we gotta invest in our black boys while they're in school, meeting them where they are, and really mentoring them. So as the next Ward 7 council member, that's what I plan to do.
Any rebuttals? Okay, thank you. And the quote is, it's harder to repair black men than to, it's harder to build black boys. It's harder to repair black men than to build black boys. So, thank you though, but I appreciate the point.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's easier to build
Thank you.
strong men than
Thank you.
repair broken.
You got it exactly right. Okay,
Thank you.
I'm getting there, but I know it's about repair and build. Okay, thank you so much. So I'm really particularly concerned about this issue around crime and how it's being framed. And so, first of all, DC is one of the few cities that actually experienced an increase in crime. I'm wondering, why do you think that's the case? What is unique about DC that the nation is going in the opposite direction, but DC is not? And in that regard, I also want you to speak to the issue of, in 2020, people were in the streets protesting about the crime bill of the 1990s. And it was a litmus test for candidates. And some said they wouldn't even vote for certain candidates because of that. Yet DC has passed the Secure DC Act. I want to understand what was problematic about the 1990 crime bill and why Secure DC is not problematic. So I'm trying to understand the distinction between what people were thinking in 2020 about crime reform, justice reform, and what we're experiencing now, which is a drumbeat toward criminalization again.
Is that me?
Yep, yep.
Okay. Well, I'll say this. I think why the district has seen a significant increase in crime over the last 4 years, I think the city is still trying to figure out what the long-term and short-term implications are of COVID. What COVID has done was expose the government's areas that need to be improved. And for me, I learned this in school. Human beings are going to be human beings. If folks are starving, they're going to take it upon themselves to provide for their families. Is that the right approach? Absolutely not, but that's the characteristic of man. So when you have Ward 7 having one of the highest unemployment rates across the city, we suffer from the highest social determinants, whether it's health, whether it's stress, whether it's trauma. All of these things are conducive to how individuals respond in society. So with that being said, when you take all those factors into consideration, unemployment, lack of housing, stability, lack of opportunities, your current condition, all of those things make individuals, they don't live, they're functioning to survive. So that answers the first portion of your question. In terms of your second portion of your question, I think Secure DC was passed because people were tired of just standing by and not letting anything happen. And residents like to feel good when they're able to touch, feel, and see changes. And I think that the council, acting in a proactive manner, introduced this legislation just to kind of take one step in the right direction. I don't think it solves everything, but I do think it's a step in the right direction.
Well, I want to agree with you. It's been, as a candidate, very interesting to see the rhetoric change over the last 4 years, from a defund rhetoric to we need more police right now and we need to lock these kids up forever. I mean, sometimes I do hear people say stuff like that, and it's really concerning. It reminds me of like the super predator rhetoric of the 80s and 90s. I think over the past 4 years, we have sent a message that you can commit crimes in DC and just get away with it. And so when we're, when we get these kids who have been carjacking and then we release them back into the community right away, that it's almost contagious, and it sends a message to their friends that you can do these crimes and there's going to be no accountability, and in fact, you'll be, looked at as like, someone to look up to, amongst your peers, and that's a real dangerous message to be sending over time. I think that drug-free zones that came up on the last panel, something that I would like to see happen is we invest our Department of Behavioral Health resources into these drug-free zones. If we're going to bring them back, we should at least be updating our approach and modernizing it so that we are investing in mental health resources and making sure that we're getting the proper substance abuse and addiction services that these people clearly need. And I think over time you'll see a right balance with that.
So I just want to make sure that I get my words correctly, and because we keep on talking about crime, this is something that comes to me. Because I think that we all are responsible, and I think that we have to stop pointing the fingers and do something about it. I think the mayor is blaming the council is blaming the courts, and people are blaming kids. But where's the responsibility for developing ideas and implementing them to improve the situation? And I don't think that it's a time to evade responsibility. I think that it is a time to embrace it. It's not a time to go alone and to blame others, but it's a time to come together to make our city safer. And as I've always said, we must invest in things that we know that keep our community safe. And what we know that keeps our community safe is while we have more police for violent offenders, we know we have to make investments in programs that work, like Cure the Streets, which are in 4 communities in Ward 7, Clay Terrace, Lincoln Heights, Benton Park, Benton Terrace. We know that we've seen a decrease in crimes there. We also have to make sure that we're making investments in our young people, and we know that they need to be around responsible adults and responsible peers. And I know this because I was around them, and my children are around them. I think that we have to make investments in our parents, and that's important because I know, because I had a child at a young age, and if it wasn't for my community supporting me and lifting me up, I would not be standing here today. Thank you.
I actually really appreciate Candidate Rashid's words. I totally believe that we can have both responsible and accountable policing. I testified when the council was considering Act Now. And Act Now was rolled into Secure DC, because Secure DC was an omnibus. It had over 100 different provisions around public safety. And I believe some of the other candidates testified as well. So you can see what people actually said about these different bills. I testified against Act Now, not because I'm not familiar with crime, not because I'm not familiar with harm, but because I thought about my aunt, whose house had been broken into maybe a month before that hearing, and there was nothing in that bill that would have stopped her house from being broken into. There was nothing in that bill that would have caught the person any faster. And when I think about public safety, those are the things people want. They want either for crime to not happen to them, or if something does happen to them, they want something to be done. And so I think it's really important that we are investing in evidence-based solutions that actually address the problems we have in front of us, not just and people actually being safe, not just like what we think will sound good or will make folks feel safe.
30 seconds rebuttal. This next question is a yes or no question, and we will not have a rebuttal time. The mayor is proposing increasing the sales tax from 6% to 6.5% and 7% by fiscal year 27. Do you support this proposal? Yes or no? We'll start with you, Ms. Thompson.
No.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you all. The next question that I have, and we'll start with you, Ms. Payne. What neighborhood in Ward 7 do you feel is underserved? If elected to council, how would you remedy this concern?
I really appreciate this question. I would say Mayfair. And the reason I say Mayfair is because during redistricting, there's no ANC representation for Mayfair whatsoever. They're part of ANC 7D, of which I'm a commissioner on. And I get calls from Mayfair because I pay for a separate telephone number so my constituents can reach out to me. And I've received telephone calls from Mayfair, and the kind of issues that they're having, police brutality being amongst them, that is something that not many other communities, especially on this side of the river, are experiencing and understand. And so I would say that the level of gun violence in Mayfair, it's very difficult to address that. So Mayfair.
Wendell will proceed, and then we'll go to you, Ms. Thompson. So it's for everyone.
I would say all of our public housing sites in Ward 7, our communities, so Lincoln Heights, Richardson Dwelling, Kenilworth, Mayfair, 37th Place, And I'm no stranger to either of those communities. And my work as the Ward 7 liaison for the Mayor's Office of Community Relations and Services, I would go there to conduct quarterly site visits. So to address this, I plan to work with all of the resident council members as well as conduct community walks with agency directors to make sure that we're addressing constituent services on site. Sorry, I know that was a yes or no question.
This was
Oh, all right,
response.
cool,
This was
cool.
a response.
Okay.
So how would you remedy?
All right, cool. Oh, did I answer how would I remedy? All right, okay, all right.
It really is hard to pick one. And it shouldn't be so hard to pick one because we do have a lot of communities that are underinvested in. It is our public housing communities. It's also a lot of the communities that our seniors live in. We forget about our senior centers in particular. I will say one experience for me that was pivotal was COVID. I spent the first 6 months of COVID, not by myself, but with other people in Ward 7, delivering meals both to families and to seniors. That's how I met Ms. Evans. That's how we built a relationship, because I delivered to Triangle View because folks were so isolated. They were so isolated. We deliver 1,000 meals a day for 6 months. And there are people in this room that were part of that. Vita took meals to River Terrace for a period of time. And so while I can name the communities that people think of when they think of crime, when they think of what it look, litter, when they think of all the negative things, what I know is there are so many pockets of Ward 7 that people don't see. And so the answer is really of all of our communities that are unseen and are isolated, and this is the range from young people to our seasoned citizens. And so making sure I'm monitoring the investment, conducting oversight, and actually getting resources to all of our communities is vitally important to me.
So we have over 28 communities in Ward 7, and when I think about underserved communities, I can go anywhere and everyone's telling me they're underserved, right? And I think that how we respond to that is making sure that we have active and present leadership in our ward. And I know what that looks like because I don't go into court to represent somebody if I'm not prepared and if I can't represent them if I don't know their issues and concerns. So when we're talking about our most vulnerable citizens, our seniors, when we're going into those buildings where they're living with mold, they have rodents and infestations, that's a problem. Or whether it is I'm going into housing and it's one person living in a building by themselves in conditions that have been going on for years. These conditions haven't just started. They've been going on for a long time, 20, 30 years. When my sister lived in Lincoln Heights, it looks the same exact way. I think as your council member, having effective oversight over these agencies, making sure that I show up for you, making sure that I'm a strong advocate on the council for you, making sure that we have a strong constituent services, that your issues are being addressed. And I think that that means tracking data, using a data-driven method. When you're contacting my office, making sure that we're recording it, we're tracking it, so that then when we are having oversight here, we know exactly what agency and we have the evidence to support it and to back it up.
Okay, I'm going to ask did you answer yet, Evan? Okay. I'm going to ask a series of questions. First, is there any rebuttal? Okay, I'm going to ask a series of questions that are yes or no. So we can just go through these real quick. Do you support Initiative 83, which supports ranked choice elections and for independents to vote in DC primaries? Yes or no? We'll start with you can just shake your head or say yes or no. No. Who does? Okay. If you win the primary, would you commit to publicly supporting a call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza? Yes or no? Yes. In the Justice Policy Institute report, Missed Opportunities, Why Inaction on Preventive Measures Undermines Public Safety in Washington, D.C., it mentions use of cash assistance or basic income programs for youth to address violence. In Wilmington, Delaware, Stockton, California, and Gainesville, Florida, cash assistance programs to youth have resulted in reduced violence, greater civic engagement, and more awareness of self-care and health outcomes. Would you support or initiate legislation for a DC government-funded program of cash assistance to youth, yes or no?
Yes, if our budget is sustainable.
Is that 4 yeses? Well, I'm assuming that you all know what I'm asking. I'm not assuming that the audience knows what I'm asking. Okay. But I believe many in the audience do know what I'm asking. Okay. Now, and then my last question before Dr. Dean, and then after Dr. Dean, we will move to audience questions. Please provide your vision. This is not a yes or no. Please provide your vision and the specific amenities you would champion in the development of Commander Stadium and Reservation 13 and the Fletcher Johnson Middle School site. Specific amenities that you would champion. And we will start with Ms. Vida Rashid.
So specific things that I would do, I can tell you what I have done is I showed up to the budget hearing before Councilmember McDuffie and advocated strongly for the $42 million that's coming to Fletcher Johnson right now. The other thing that I can tell you that I have done is as an ANC commissioner on 7E, I made sure that I was present, I made sure that I was showing up, and I made sure that the community was involved in that process. Fletcher Johnson has been promised to us many, many years before I was even an ANC commissioner, and it's still sitting there vacant. It was used as a swing space. Many things have happened. I think now the mayor is saying that it's going to be a hospital, so that is something that I would support because we do have a lot of trauma east of the river, and we have no hospital here, as you know, Mr. Ambrose, and your work in the health community. And what was the other part?
Specific amenities that you would champion
Yes, and
for all of those sites.
well, we know a hospital was slated to come to Fletcher Johnson, but what I heard the community wanted was retail space, adult education, and senior housing at Fletcher. I'm not sure how I would champion that if something is already in the budget for a hospital to come. In regards to RFK Stadium, what I would like to see, I would like to get more input from the community to see what they want, but yes, I would support a stadium coming there. I don't think that the city should have to pay for the infrastructure, being with the current constraints that we have on the budget right now. I would like to see a hotel there. I know that's something that has been in the planning process, retail, more grocery stores and more housing, and also making sure that we have infrastructure so that people can get in and out of that location.
Yes. So my big goal for Ward 7, especially east of the river, and Fletcher Johnson would be a perfect site, is to get more grocery stores open and to expand farmers markets throughout the ward. So that would be a big, that would help alleviate a lot of our health disparities. I am pleased to see the urgent care clinic opening at Fletcher Johnson, and so supporting small business owners, especially those in the food sector, more sit-down restaurants, healthier restaurants, so that it's not just fried food all the time, but that you can actually get a good healthy meal on a regular basis. For Reservation 13 and RFK, so it's no secret that I am opposed to a new NFL stadium coming to RFK, and the reason for that is the amount of surface parking lots that are required in order to have tailgating, which is an important part of the football fan experience. So unfortunately, with surface parking lots, there's no economic growth that can really take place on them. And so for 8 to 10 games a year, it just doesn't really make sense in terms of creating jobs that are not just seasonal, but that are long-lasting and well-paying. And so I want to see more sports amenities for the whole community, especially seniors, because we don't have enough of those. We definitely need to keep the fields at RFK. I've an Olympic-sized pool, an indoor track has been among some of the top requests. More retail, I would say that one thing that a lot of people can agree on is that we want to see more mixed-use development and more affordable housing.
The first portion of the question is easy because I'm the only candidate in this race who can honestly say that they managed the project at Fletcher Johnson site. And some of these amenities that are bearing fruit, it was because of my work advocating in the Deputy Mayor's Office for planning and economic development while listening to community concerns, which I know very well because I was an A&C commissioner in 7E. So with that being said, I'm glad that the site has gotten the urgent care and the necessary funding needed to move things forward. In terms of specific amenities that I would like to see at the site, more trails for seniors. I know that there has been conversations about that site possibly being a senior village, as well as a grocery store, which I share the sentiments of some of my colleagues as well. In terms of what my vision is for the grounds of RFK, to my earlier point, to ensure that we collect as much community input on the front end, there's a number of things that I will push for. One, establishing a RFK task force comprised of the surrounding neighborhoods that will be directly impacted by the site: Hill East, Benning Road, River Terrace, Cayman Park. That way you're getting as much community input as possible to really shape the grounds of the stadium while pushing for an equitable development plan to create business opportunities and prevent long-term residents. And then lastly, I will really push for infrastructure needs to support the development of the site.
I think achieving the community vision for Fletcher Johnson is vitally important. I think being honest about what that takes is also vitally important. I'm looking at people in this room, including former Commissioner Settles, including Dr. Marladine, including Ambrose Lane, who were part of that community vision. And I can say, as a person who is an education person, the thing that I knew when KIPP came to us and said we wanted to build a high school is that I already had 10 high schools. What I also knew is that I did not have 10 places I could get coffee as a Ward 7 resident. I didn't have 10 places I could eat. I didn't have 10 places I could see a doctor. I didn't have 10 places I could get a hammer or a nail as a homeowner. I didn't have 10 places, the list goes on in Ward 7. And that community vision is so much more than just urgent care. Urgent care is important and should be part of it, but so are the parts that had to do with adult education. So are the parts that had to do with us actually having an art space. We are the only ward in the city without an art space. We cannot forget that. So are the parts that had to do with retail and other amenities. So is the fact that Fletcher Johnson is the 4th largest parcel of city-owned land, and $42 million for infrastructure is not enough. We need to stop applauding underinvestment in Ward 7. We need to get our fair share. We need to look at projects like McMillan and like Walter Reed to see what they are getting for the government, to know what we should be getting from the government and what's possible, and that's true for Fletcher Johnson. It's also true for RFK.
Are there any rebuttals?
I need to rebut Wendell Felder again. You have brought up 2 times that you want to create an RFK task force. That already exists. I created it last year, and we did lead a survey with over 2,000 responses, and we found that over 70% of the community is strongly opposed to a new stadium. And so again, I would just say that the results from that survey are very clear. It did not have any Maryland residents responding to it because we targeted only Kingman Park, Rosedale, Hill East, Capitol Hill, and River Terrace. And so you can rest assured that the results are conclusive.
Well, thank you for that, Ms. Payne. I have a different recollection. Just to ensure that I think something was missed. As the next council member, right, making sure that we get perspectives from the surrounding communities, a task force is needed. I have no recollection of you establishing a task force. I don't know how often you guys meet. To say the least, with such a large conversation It requires mass community input, not only from residents who will be directly impacted, but also the greater Ward 7. And as the chair of the commission, I want to make sure I'm unequivocally clear. Fletcher, RFK is not new. You may be a new commissioner, but I've been fighting for this for the last decade.
Okay, thank you. So we've talked about, I have two questions. We've talked about a lot of what's not right in Ward 7, but there's a lot that is right, and I want you to, I made an intentional decision when I moved to DC to move to Ward 7. I saw so much beauty in Ward 7, so much potential. I want you to tell me your fondest memory and what makes you committed and remain in Ward 7. If we can start with that, with Ebony Payne, and then I have a follow-up question after that. But I want to change the tempo of this, and I want us to have some positive attributes about where we live. Okay.
Sure. I will start off with talking about a tree that I saw when I was in high school, and it was littered with plastic bags. And that was my very first civic engagement, was testifying in favor of our plastic bag tax. That bag tax now funds the Anacostia Green Boats program on Kingman and Heritage Islands, of which I am now the ANC commissioner for. So that was just something that it feels like a very full circle moment for me. And I'm so very proud of the environmental leadership that the community has shown, especially with Kingman and Heritage Islands. I still talk to people all the time who don't even know that the islands exist, and that there's 2 islands in the Anacostia River that have walking trails on them, and you can go fishing, you can rent the kayaks for free in exchange for picking up trash. And so that is my fondest memory, is just watching the islands go from no man's land, where it was like dumping grounds. In fact, it was supposed to be a parking lot for RFK Stadium, and now it's this huge wildlife preserve, and there's foxes and blue herons and turtles and frogs, and there's all kind of environmental youth programs that are run on the islands now. So that would definitely be my fondest memory.
Okay, that explains why a fox comes down my street all the time. Okay. Wendell.
I would say my fondest memory, probably when I was 4 years old. I think it was the blizzard in like '94. So I grew up in public housing. I used to live on 58th and East Capitol. And I remember we lived across from the street from the high rise, for folks who might be familiar. And I remember it snowed for a little bit and then it stopped. And then my grandmother, she told me, she said, you can't eat the first coat of snow. You wait till the second coat of snow. So, you know, I think about that childhood memory, and, you know, I'm now raising a beautiful 14-month-old. You know, hopefully we can create those memories, but, you know, it reaffirms that Ward 7 has always been and will continue to be my heart.
Ebony Rose Thompson, then Peters.
I really appreciate the spirit of this question because Ward 7 is not a place of last resort for me. I not just love, but I believe in Ward 7. And when I think about some of my earliest memories, they actually involve some people in this room. I remember my grandparents being ANC commissioners. My granddad was one of the first ANCs. My grandma was an ANC. My aunt was an ANC. You served, right? And so I remember being present for so much of the community building that was true then. I remember them having things like Know Your Neighbor Day. I remember the ANC office being in my school, right? And like I would actually see my grandma at school every day. Like they were part of our community in that way. I remember them having like, being a DEM mom. Like those things were really important to me. And then I remember like moving back to Ward 7 after college. I was a kid my mom thought wasn't coming home because I was going into the Foreign Service. And I started working for DCPS and got to know my community in a different way. That's how I met Saray and her son. And so I think some of the fondest memories I have in Ward 7 really revolve around the people and really revolve around the community and really are strengths-based. And really are things we need to continue to invest in. Not like we can talk about the budget and the oversight and the legislation, but we also need a council member who's going to invest in us as a community. So I really appreciate the spirit of this question.
I think Ward 7 is a great place to live, and I wouldn't want to live anywhere else, and that's why I'm here. My fondest memory is writing a letter when I went to River Terrace Elementary School and walking to the mailbox and putting that letter in there and walking back. My fondest memories are going up to the ice cream truck, getting me a pickle with some sunflower seeds. My fondest memories are going into catching a bus, going into every neighborhood, whether I was up 37th, whether I was catching a bus down Lincoln Heights, whether I was going up 58th, whether I was up Clay Terrace, Potomac Gardens, wherever. I didn't have any business being. But my fondest memory of or cheering down Rosedale or up Kelly Miller or wherever, my fondest memory of Ward 7 is community, right? And that's why everything I say is always leads back to community, because I'm a product of Ward 7. I wouldn't be here because of Ward 7. It's these experiences that have shaped my life, and it's who it's made me to be today. It's given me a different perspective. I bought my first home here in Ward 7. I'm raising my kids here in Ward 7. My family is still here in Ward 7 in the house that I grew up. My kindergarten teacher is still here in Ward 7, right? So these are things that make me happy. So that's what I think about when I think about the great Ward 7.
So these
You was eating ice? You was eating snow?
For these next questions, you will have 45 seconds. There is no rebuttal. And so they're targeted. So Mr. Wendell, you talked about school visits and how school visits for school personnel. However, typically these visits are typically performed by already overworked educators. How would you encourage home visits while ensuring these visits are not linked to educator performance ratings and further burnout?
That's a good question. I think about, the village, right? As the next Ward 7 council member, what I would do, even though it's not traditionally under the roles and responsibilities of my constituent service team, but what I would do is I would work with my constituent service team to do home visits and report back to the schools, right? And the reason why I want them to do home visits is because we'll have access to wraparound services to provide to families, and not only in the education space, but folks who might need social services, who might need to be connected with employment. But I'm a firm believer in meeting folks where they are. I think about my time doing constituent services as a MOCR and being a 4-term ANC commissioner, and I'm telling you, you never know what people go through. So by doing home visits, you build relationships with them, you give them hope, and you really get to solve some of their deeply rooted issues. Thank you.
This is directly for you. So you're saying if elected council, you plan to conduct home visits, a yes or no question?
Yes.
Right. This next question is directed towards Ebony Rose and Vita. You mentioned DYRS. What changes are needed within DYRS to ensure juveniles receive rehabilitative services? We'll start with you, Ebony Rose.
I think it's both funding and it's oversight. I really appreciate that Councilmember Trayon White has actually been making visits to DYRS to understand the conditions our young people are in. I think it is really important that we not just and I say this as a education person who gets to talk to teachers, but I also talk to the young people. I think we need to know what folks are experiencing. I think it is the council member's responsibility to conduct effective oversight. I'm old enough to remember the old Oak Hill. I also think it's really important that we're not just paying attention to DYRS, but we're also paying attention to the jail, because somebody mentioned a lawsuit around education that we have with the jail currently. And so I think those are steps that we should be taking to make improvements.
Some of the improvements that we can make to DYRS is making sure that it's maintained properly. We're filling DYRS faster than we can actually hire people to work there. Then we can have more space for our young people to be there. I also think that We need to make sure that they're actually implementing the rehabilitative programs. Similar to when we had the Lorton prison back a long time ago, when people were sentenced under the Youth Rehabilitation Act, they weren't actually being rehabilitated. They were just in a general population with everyone, so they weren't being served. I think the whole purpose of the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services is to make sure that we put our young people on a pathway to something positive and not on a pipeline to prison.
We are going to audience questions, starting first with ETAP. Please ask your question.
Thank you. Oh, and I'm glad we're talking about crime, because due to the heightened crime rate, a number of senior citizens are especially vulnerable, physically as well as mentally, living in isolation, longing for connection to stay in their spaces without the fear of violence. Will you introduce a bill that requires security or funding for security in all senior buildings?
Yes, thank you for that question. And I understand because my uncle lives in the Capitol Gateway Senior Home, and when I went to speak with them, safety was their #1 concern as well. And so it's not just about making sure that everyone in the home understands that not allowing people in that you don't know into the facility and into your home, because that is the first that's the first point of vulnerability, is just letting people in. But then also making sure that you have a officer that you have a personal relationship with and who fully understands your neighbors, and that you can call on and reach out to at a moment's notice. And so yes, I am fully in support of increasing security for all senior homes in the ward.
Absolutely. Seniors are one of my biggest priorities. And to ensure that they are able to successfully age in place, we want to make sure that they're protected and feel safe. This is nothing that I'm not familiar with. Having working relationships with the 6th District Commander, whether it's been Conti, Commander Taylor, Commander Habibullah, our new commander. So really making sure our senior buildings are a priority. I know that due to the limited police manpower, unfortunately we can't provide 24-hour service. However, as the next Ward 7 council member, that's why I'm really pushing for officers to live in the community in which they serve. They're more invested. Additionally, maybe it's a one-time funding program, but to hire officers, private security officers that patrol the 8 senior buildings here in Ward 7. Oh, sorry, I was about to make.
All right. It's always good to see you, Ms. Evans. I heard this from you all. This is not the first time I've heard this from ETAP. I think this is a really important question. And I think it's not just the security, but it's the management overall. It is the management overall of these senior properties that we are funding through DC Housing. Because I can tell you that when I was last at Triangle View, there was a gentleman who was in a wheelchair. And he told me that he looks out of his window sometimes because he thinks if there was a fire, I couldn't get out. And I'm on the 3rd floor. And I don't know how that happens. And you told me that your security panel didn't work, that they wouldn't know where the fire started. You told me you had mold.
It's time.
And so it's the security, but it's the health and safety overall.
Yes, I would support that, but as your council member, we have the Department of Housing, which is over top of that, and those things should not be happening, as which I've said several times to you all. And it seems like we starting to have our senior buildings turned into nuisance properties because we're having people with drugs and different things going on in these buildings that we're not talking about. And I don't want you to feel safe. I want you to be safe, right? I think that we need to work with our Office of Attorney General and make sure that we're getting them in there to address some of these issues, because we have a public housing and community safety division in that office. That was something that Cole Racine started, and R.G. Weatherton is over top of that. So please write her name down. I'll give you her information. as your council member, having effective oversight. Some of these buildings have been in disrepair, as I've stated, over many times, over 30+ years. So making sure that we're having effective oversight, and making sure that things are actually getting done and we're not getting lip service.
Are there any other audience questions? If there are, please stand and come and get the mic. I will take 2 audience questions.
So there is a proposal for a bill for social housing. Do you intend to co-sponsor that bill, yes or no, and why? So social housing, the Green New Deal for social housing is a proposal to have, city-owned, like publicly owned and tenant-managed properties with, a set number of subsidized and market rate units. Yes. Does that provide the context?
Okay, I can answer that. Yes. So social housing, there's actually a model in Montgomery County, Maryland, for social housing that's been very successful. So it is one tool that we really can be utilizing to increase our affordable housing in the city. And Ward 7 has lots of vacant land that is underutilized, and I think that piloting some kind of social housing program is a good idea. And we can look to Montgomery County to see their best practices and how they accomplished that. So yes, I would be in favor of exploring that as an option to affordable housing.
Let me provide some clarity. It's Bill 250191, the Green New Deal Housing Amendment Act of 2023. And I think that the question is whether or not you would support it, yes or no.
Yes.
Anyone else?
I think, I'll be honest, I think we're a little confused because you said 45 seconds for housing questions, for all audience questions. Yes, I would be supportive of social housing because I know, like I told you about my sister, she is a working professional who is struggling to make sure she can actually afford to live in DC. And social housing is actually designed for working professionals. That's really important. I think the other part that we just need to take some responsibility around, and as far as implementation, is our current public housing, too many of those units are in disrepair. We have whole units that sit vacant, and that's on us as a city because we don't maintain them, and we're not putting in the money to modernize them. We talk about that with schools, we should talk about it with housing as well.
Yes, I would support public housing, but to my colleague Ebony Rose Thompson's point, I think we have to do a better job in managing the existing housing we have within our portfolio, specifically surrounding public housing. What you're describing, first thing that pops in my mind is new communities. And I know for quite some time there's been conversations between the Deputy Mayor's Office for Planning and Economic Development and the DC Housing Authority to make sure residents who have been relocated from their sites to successfully come back into the community in which they recently lived. So I say all that to say, yes, I will support it, but I also think we need to do a better job in maintaining and fully implementing the existing housing programs that we have.
I would just say, yes, I would be open to exploring that. I do think that we have a lot of housing here now that's not being used. Just like I said, I had a senior in one building. She was living by herself. It's 7 or 8 other vacant units there. I think that we're not properly maintaining the housing stock that we currently have in the District of Columbia, and people are living there in some inhumane conditions. I have heard about this, and I think the one concern that people have raised is about the management of the social housing. So I would definitely love to talk with you more about that if you have some time.
Next question.
I live at Capitol Gateway, and the main problem is security. And where I live, the building is not under housing, it's private owned. And what we really need is security in that building. So what can y'all do about getting us security?
One of the things that I'm thinking about, I've had the opportunity to see some things across the city, and I'm pretty innovative. I think what we should do, and I actually emulated this from the Housing Authority. What I'm gonna push for as the next Ward 7 council member, if you got any vacant units, and I hate to be taken from our seasoned citizens, but maybe what we can do is have 2 units set aside for law enforcement officers or security officers to live in the building. That way, think about superintendents, right? They live there, they fix the challenges. That way, if something were to happen, all you could do is knock on the door or call someone and they can de-escalate the situation. That's one of the things I'm thinking about right now.
So one thing I would like to see happen is for there to be funding for our senior homes to have a dedicated police officer, kind of like a beat cop, but for your individual senior home, so that the officer knows all of the residents, understands a little bit about them and their families, and is available to answer questions and concerns when they happen. And then they can actually provide trainings for the residents, safety trainings, and things of that sort, so that when an emergency does occur, everyone is fully aware of what they shouldn't be doing. And that includes letting people in. You know, I talked to a senior home east of the river, and they were having an issue with people living, like the homeless living, like somehow finding their way in. And so that was causing a real safety concern and issues. So making sure that residents are fully educated and that you have like a beat cop for your building.
It doesn't matter if you live in public or private housing, you deserve to be safe. And if you have a building and you have a management company that's managing your building, they should be providing you with safety. They should make sure that your building is secure, right? Making sure the doors are not propped open so that people can come in and out. You have to make sure that the other residents that live in your building are not allowing these people to come in the building. The buildings can't be in disrepair. The fire alarms and things of that nature should be working. That's how we keep our buildings secure. Some of these suggestions will actually cost you more money because you're in a private building, so your rent might be increased to actually pay for an officer to stay in your building or to have a dedicated person. But your landlord or the building owner should make sure that your building is safe and secure. And if it's not, I would suggest that you go to the Office of Attorney General, because we have a housing division that we pay for with our property taxes that can represent you all in court.
I think it's really important we hold landlords accountable. I do. I actually think it is unacceptable that you don't feel safe. That's just what it is. I'm encouraged because I believe you all are part of ETAP now, when you all have organized with other people. I think, like Candidate Rashid said, working with the Office of the Attorney General is important. Working with the Office of the Tenant Advocate is important. I do not think that we as a city should be paying private people to perform security. I think that we should hold them accountable as landlords for the expectations we have for all of our citizens. I also think it is absolutely important that just in general with safety, we are working with MPD and others to make sure the community around you is safe. Because if we're making sure that the community around you is safe, that's a big part of the ballgame.
Next question, please. This is the last audience question. Oh, you have a quick question? Okay.
How y'all doing? Chris Thomas, Chief of Staff for Hunter Fathers. 3-part question here dealing with our black and brown youth that I don't believe was brought up in none of this. The first thing is, the number one reason that a lot of our youth are dying is because of gun violence. That's number one. What is going to be your action plan, any of you, that's going to not only take but keep the illegal guns and ghost guns off the streets of DC? Number two, something else we didn't speak about. We're number 2 in the nation for opioid overdoses. And in Virginia, they allow Narcan to be on the school property and on the person of the high school and middle schools. So would you all propose and all accept a bill to do the same thing in, obviously, DC schools, so that we can slow down and deter some of the overdoses in our school? And number 3, the other big issue that we have right now, not only homelessness with our youth, but obviously dealing with the suicide rate and the depression and the anxiety rate that no one's talked about. What are y'all going to propose so that we're able to have more centers and make it more organic and just easy, accessible for all youth in all 8 wards to be able to deal with these situations?
Couple of things. As your next Ward 7 council member, I talked about this before, treating every commission like a small city, right? There's 5 commissions in Ward 7, A and C 7, B, C, D, E, and F. I'll conduct a needs assessment. When I talk about the needs assessment, I'm looking at their roads, their infrastructure, their schools, their vacant buildings, just so I can have a better sense of what's available and at our disposal, so I can activate the right DC government agencies to kind of address some of the most pressing challenges. In terms of your 3 questions, with our youth specifically, for all the vacant churches that are in Ward 7 or even churches, I want to bring in the pastors. They have a lot of vacant units or they're underutilized because people are still transitioning from COVID. I want to open up their basement, allow them to offer prayer, counseling, a meal, and provide them with funding. In terms of Narcan at schools, I support that. In terms of what we can do to get the guns off the street, I think MPD does a good job in offering programs to drop guns off, but it's all about intelligence. If people aren't saying anything, it's really difficult for us to see the results that we want to see.
Thank you for that question. I wanted to address gun violence first because, let's face it, like our country is completely in denial in terms of, being able to make any headway on guns. Something that is particularly concerning is the proliferation of ghost guns and those parts. That is part of the reason why we have such an increase in gun violence, because it's just so much easier now to get your hands on a gun. I think at this point, we really should be teaching kids like gun safety, and that you never point a gun at something that you don't intend on destroying. And if they're going to be using them, then at least be responsible, since that's what our country claims to want to promote, is responsible gun ownership. But social media, and we have to reach these kids where they are, and clearly they're on social media, and so making sure that we're reaching them there, and funding nurses in schools so that we can supply them with Narcan, and make sure that we're funding social workers so that we can reach these kids where they are.
Okay. So illegal guns off the street. We used to have a buyback program, but what was happening were people were bringing guns that were non-operable to be brought back. One of the things that we need to do is partner with the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and doing a multi-jurisdictional approach, because what we're seeing is that most of these guns are coming from Virginia, right, and coming into our city and getting into the hands of our young people. I think programs like Violence Interrupters, like Alliance to Concerned Black Men, we've seen a 45% decrease in assault with deadly weapons such as guns in Benning Park, Benning Terrace, Clay Terrace, and Lincoln Heights. You're talking about drugs. We have to make it so that drugs are not cool. It wasn't cool when I was growing up to be off a dipper. We got to make sure that that's not the same thing now. And yes, people need to have training on Narcan, which we have been doing with No Slide Zone all across the city. In the suicide rate, we have an 811 number with the Department of Behavioral Health that they do, because our young people are on social media. They're constantly comparing themselves to people all day. That is an option that they have now.
I think a couple of things are already in place that we actually need to make sure actually happen. So one good thing that was a part of Secure DC is it actually requires the mayor to come up with a comprehensive safety plan and provide it to council. And we need to hold her responsible for that. 2, we have not had a permanent head of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention for some time. And while the mayor appoints, the council confirms. They need to demand that we have a permanent person in that office. 3, it seemed like we just dropped the NEAR Act, which deals with a lot of the things you're talking about. But also, multi-jurisdictional approach is important. Right? That's important. That's something that's not in place. Last, what I'll say about young people, we already do a survey every year. Folks should know this. We don't need another assessment. We already do it every year. And they tell us they don't feel seen and they are lost.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. So my question is about statehood. I have not heard anyone talk about statehood. So the first question is a yes or no, And then the next one is just for you to answer, I guess, whatever minutes you have. But the first one is, have you ever advocated or lobbied for statehood? This statehood. The second one is, if you become the council member, what is your take on statehood and what would you do to help push statehood forward, or with not statehood but tax reform, or us getting judiciary oversight?
That's a good question. Yes, I support statehood, and I've been supporting statehood in a number of capacities as the former chair of the Ward 7 Democrats, stand hand to hand with the DC Democratic State Committee to really push for representation and to make sure we get our fair share as a city. As the next Ward 7 council member, what I plan to do is work with our Congresswoman Norton, as well as the Mayor's Office of Federal Affairs, to build on the legislation that we've passed to make sure that we adequately get statehood.
Yes, thank you for that question. I fully support statehood, as everyone should. Especially when it comes to our crime and criminal justice system, we have a bifurcated system that's split into two, where we handle juvenile cases, but then as soon as they become adults, it becomes federal, and that makes it very difficult to coordinate our efforts. And so achieving statehood is not just a matter of improving our democracy, but it is also a necessity to improving our crime situation. I am very proud to have the many congressional endorsements and using my networks within Congress to make sure that we are working very diligently and methodically to achieve statehood in our lifetimes is going to be a top priority of mine.
Thank you for this question, and thank you for your work, Ms. Gant, around statehood. I know you've been a strong advocate in Ward 7 for that. Yes, I fully support statehood, and I know that it's important because we don't elect our judges here. They're appointed by Congress to our courts at DC Superior Court. Yes. He threw me off. I'm sorry. Can you? Start again. Yes, I fully support statehood. Yes, one of the reasons why we need statehood is because we don't have control over our criminal justice system in the District of Columbia. Yes, while the president appoints them, they go through a confirmation process through Congress because we have Article 2 judges in the DC Superior Court and Article 3 judges in the federal courts of the District of Columbia. And I know because I worked there for over a decade. The other reason why it's important for us to have statehood is so that we can have control over our own matters. When we had issues going on, we couldn't get any outside help because we did not have statehood. And one of the things that I have supported is PACs. One that's been run by Bruce Spiver that he's doing to make sure that we get statehood, and Andrea Thomas, who's right here now, a new Ward 7 resident, pushing for statehood. Thank you.
I think it's really important for people to be honest about what they know, what they don't, what they've done, what they haven't done. I personally believe that DC should be a state. I will tell anybody, DC has been should be the 51st state. And have I personally actually done enough action around statehood? No. But that's somewhere where I'm learning more. I literally had a conversation yesterday with Andrea about why the responses in the ACLU questionnaires were so dangerous, right? When people said they would go to Congress and overturn. There are actually 3 anti-DC bills in front of Congress right now that nobody is talking about. In the budget, one of the things people should be paying attention to is the funding for statehood. There is little to none. They have 1 FTE dedicated to this. And yeah, I need to learn and do more and look forward to doing more as the next council member.
Thank you, and this is our final question of the evening. Thank you for your thoughtful answers. So much that we've talked about today really deals with disparities and gaps. And as I asked the previous panel, in the greater Washington area, the racial wealth gap is 81 to 1 white to black, and the income gap is 3 to 1 white to black. What policy solutions would you champion to close those gaps for Ward 7 residents? And I really want you to focus in on wealth gap over income gap, because that is what will change the trajectory of Ward 7 residents.
A couple things. As your next Ward 7 council member, what I would advocate for is to, one, push the mayor's initiative that create more home ownership opportunities for Black and brown communities. Additionally, I would have quarterly meetings with all of the small business owners in Ward 7, all of the inspiring business owners in Ward 7, the Department of DSLBD, Business and DSL, you know what DSLBD means, small and business owners, and say, hey, these are the projects that are coming down the pipeline in Ward 7. These small business owners need to be a part of that. Additionally, I would modify the RFP for all of developments and make sure that we widen the home ownership opportunity for developers.
Time.
Oh, wow, that's quick. Okay, thank you.
I want to first start off by talking about generational homes and making sure that our residents have the financial literacy. You know, my father died without a will, and my family lost many properties in that process. And a simple will would have been the difference between all of that generational wealth being passed on to my family and what ended up happening, which is that we just lost it. And then, you know, those homes are now worth millions of dollars in the city. So making sure that we are providing financial literacy resources, expanding vocational education, and investing in our small business owners and entrepreneurs, and making sure that we're creating jobs within the ward, especially like mom and pop stores.
Time.
Thank you.
I think we need to make investments in the middle class, making sure that we're fully funding our HPAP program and that it's not running out of funding and that people have to wait all the way until October of the year. I benefited from that. I'm creating generational wealth for my children. They'll have a home that they'll own when they get old enough. I also think that we need to make more investments in vocational training so that people can actually make a livable wage to actually purchase a home and to actually stay here. We talk about business owners. I own a small business, created that east of the river to provide legal services to people. I think we need to make sure that we're making that process more competitive so that people can be business owners right here in our community, which I think would decrease the income and wealth gap in our communities.
I talked about the importance of home ownership and HPAP in my previous response. I think it's not just important that we're funding HPAP, but making sure that folks are able to navigate those programs, because that's the thing that my sister ran into. And the reason she was able to layer those programs is because of the service provider who helped her do that, and not everybody is helping people do that, okay? So we have the money there, and then we have to have people access it. One of the things people talk about is Marionberry gave them their first job. But one of the things I don't think people talk about enough is the class of millionaires Marionberry created because he opened up government to business, to Black business. And I think we have a responsibility to do that. I think we need to better navigate CBEs and MBEs and alleviate some of the burdens before that. And our last thing I will say, as the president of the SBOE, we passed financial literacy standards. I'm proud of that, but that is not a replacement for systemic solutions.
Time. Sorry. First of all, before they give their 1-minute closing, I want to just say how impressed I am with these candidates, all of the candidates that have presented today. Our goal was to have a substantive debate. We didn't want to get into the muck and the mire and the back and the forth and all that other mess. We just wanted to deal with specific issues. Some of the issues have been raised at other debates, but other issues have not been raised at the other debates. Let me just make that perfectly clear. And I am very just proud, number one, to be a Ward 7 resident, number two, to see the quality of the candidates that we have, and to deal with some of the issues that no one else really wanted to deal with. And so we should be giving them an applause. Please do that. Give them applause. they just performed admirably and tried to answer each question as much as they could honestly. And that's all we can ask for as a Ward 7 resident electing our next Ward 7 council member. And that's for all the candidates, not just this panel, but the previous panel as well. I'm just proud. And so we will now go to a 1-minute closing, and then we will conclude the Million Man Vote first Ward 7 council debate. And we will start with Ebony Rose Thompson.
I think I did my opening first, but I'm happy to do my closing first as well.
I'm gonna switch it, Ebony.
Huh?
I'm gonna be fair, I'm gonna switch it. I did not realize that. We'll start with Wendell Felder, and we'll come back to you.
Oh, okay.
Well, first and foremost, thank you again for hosting this phenomenal forum to hear from each of the candidates. Thank you all for coming. Allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Wendell Felder. I grew up in public housing, navigated DC public schools, became the first generation homeowner, college graduate. Could have went anywhere. Like you guys could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me. I'm here in the community, making it a better place, raising my family. I have the government experience, whether it's dealing with constituent services, whether it's navigating the budget process, whether it's having the relationships on council to get legislative passed. I am equipped and ready from day one to move our ward forward. I look for your support. I'm number 1 on the ballot for a reason, and you can stay connected with me by visiting our website at wendell-ward7.org, and also check out our Palm ballot, which has my direct number. I'm the only candidate who has their direct number. Reach out to me if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and Million Man Vote very much for having me today. I greatly appreciate all of you coming out and taking your Saturday to be here today. My name is Ebony Payne, that is Ebony with a Y, and I look forward to the opportunity to represent you on the City Council, and very much am passionate about investing in our young people and making sure that we keep them out of trouble, and prioritizing our public safety, making sure that we are actively solving our food desert and health disparities in the ward, and making sure that we are investing all of your public dollars wisely over the next 4 years. You can learn more about me and my campaign at ebonypayneforward7.com, and I look forward to connecting with all of you after the forum.
Thank you, Million Man Vote. My name is Vita Rashid. I'm proud to be from Ward 7. I'm proud to be educated in Ward 7. I'm proud to be raising my family here in Ward 7. And I'm proud to be running for City Council to represent you as your next council member for Ward 7. It's this community that has poured so much into me, and I would not be standing here before you today if it wasn't for your investments. As your next council member, I look forward to making sure that we have strong constituent services, making sure that we have active and present leadership in our ward. I'm making sure that I'm going to address the public safety issues that impact us every day, so you don't have to feel like you're safe going into your building when you're going home, or whether you're walking your dog and not feeling safe. I'm going to make sure that we have responsible development in Ward 7, where if you've been here, you've been able to stay here, and that where we will welcome new people here, whether you've been here for 7 years, 7 days, or 7 minutes. I look forward to engaging you all. To learn more about me, please visit my website at voteforvida, VEDA.com. Thank you for your time.
So again, my name is Ebony Rose Thompson. I think what's important in our next council member is vision. I think what's important in our next council member is capable leadership. I think what's important in our next council member is commitment. I told you all at the top of this when I did my opening statement, I'm not shy about saying that I'm a 5th generation Washingtonian. My vision for Ward 7, my vision for this city is that we are not creating an environment where people are struggling to make it out, because they should be able to and want to make it back. That is why I care about the things I care about. That is why I'm committed to the policies I'm committed to. That is why I'm committed to the investments that we all need to make Ward 7 work for all of us. I am someone that believes government can work
government can work for us, and we just need the right people, which is not just me, but it's you all with me, to get that work done.
Please give a hand to our candidates. I want to go ahead and thank my co-moderators, Dr. Marla Dean and Carmel Henry from the NAACP, Vice President of the NAACP. I want to thank my timekeeper, who did a wonderful job keeping time. Thank you all for coming, and I hope that you all signed in when you came in. We're going to collect those sheets right now. But thank you for coming. I appreciate it. We are going to be trying to put this debate on the Ward 7 listserv, hopefully, and so that people in Ward 7 can see exactly what it is that happened here. So thank you for coming. Everyone, take care and have a great evening. Thank you to the candidates.